Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. This is an open Q&A. We're doing open Q&As all the way through season 2 of House of the Dragon here on the Thursday. So it's basically as we've been doing so far. There will be a lot of questions about episode 6 of House of the Dragon season 2. I've got a lot of questions from my patrons on that. I will pick up as much as I can from the live chat as we're going through. I should say up front, episode 6, there are a lot of questions because this is the episode that has veered the most away from Fire and Blood, from the book that we have. So personally, I know a lot of people sort of ask me, what do I think? As a whole, I'll give you my overall impression. There are some things I think that worked really well. There are some things I'm not so sure on, and there are some things that I'm going to give them a little bit of time just to see where they're going to go with this. So I'm going to cut a little bit of slack on some things, but lots and lots and lots of things. To the extent that there are some things that nobody's asked me about here that I think in any other episode would have been massive and everyone would have been talking about it. So, for example, they named an entirely new Targaryen princess who, when you go back, is probably roughly Aegon the Conqueror's timeline. If you remember when Sir Steffon Darklyn was there and Rhaenyra goes, oh yeah, so your grandmother's grandmother, well, who might that be? Well, if you go Steffon Darklyn, I don't know, a rough guess what kind of generation he is, maybe kind of sort of the same generation as Viserys and Daemon. If you go up to the great grandparents of Viserys and Daemon, that's Aegon's generation. So are we saying Aegon had 3 sisters? Are we saying actually this is like a generation? This isn't an exact science, obviously. Is it a generation up? Are we saying this is an aunt we didn't know about for Aegon the Conqueror? So there are some massive things that they did in this episode that, because of the other stuff that happened, we just haven't worked our way through, I think, as a community. So I will try and pick up on as many of these different issues as I can through this. As is the case with all of these open Q&A, this will dot about a bit. So I've tried the first part of this to bunch together questions about the episode that we've just had. Then I'll be taking a few questions about Song of Ice and Fire things more broadly, and then I shall move on to Lord of the Rings and other things that I cover on this channel. But let's get going, first of all, with a question from one of my patrons, Ranabir Mitra, hi there, saying, salutations of Robert and Dan the dog. And Dan the dog fans, by the way, this is a rare treat in that he's just the other side of this green screen. For whatever reason, he's decided he doesn't want to go to bed tonight, and he's still staying here. So the chances of a Dan cameo are higher than they usually are. No promises, because he seems to be fast asleep right now, but there we go. Anyway, how do you feel that we're supposed to interpret Daemon crying after hearing of Grover Tully's death post Alice's intervention? This might be one for the chat too, because there are just so many interpretations out there. Well, yeah, I'd love to hear about what the chat thinks here, but to remind you of the situation, so we get Daemon, who's been going through, and we will cover this, don't worry, he's been going through all of these visions, and eventually he just like almost rage quits. He just like goes out. Alice stops him, has a bit of a heart-to-heart with him, and says, give it 3 days. See what happens in 3 days. And so he seems to hang around, and then he gets the news that old Grover Tully has died, and so his grandson has taken over. Now, we've had the explanation already here from Alice Rivers that the Tullys have been the family that for a long, long time they've been kind of leading, guiding the Riverlands, being the wise old hands. And the fact that they've not been there because Grover Tully has been technically still alive, but actually not able to do much, has meant that presence hasn't been there. So that the Riverlands haven't been kept in order. When he dies, that suddenly means that all of the pieces start to fall into place. And so we should expect, I think, the Riverlands to come in behind Daemon over the course of the next episode or two. We've only got 2 episodes left, don't forget. But we should expect the Riverlands to now come behind him. And Daemon, when he hears the news, he cries. Now, why is that? I think for me, the answer is the fact that he has gone through this whole character arc of these visions. And the main thing seems to have been about him always abandoning the people that he loves and cares about. And he's never been there and he's never taken on the responsibilities that he should, etc., etc. One of the other things is he never asks for help. And here he does. He asks Alice for help, and she is amused by this to start with, but then she accepts it and she says, "Okay, good. I'm glad you're asking for help." And that's when she says, "Give it 3 days and see what happens." And Daemon trusts that. He sticks around. He seems to accept that. Okay, we'll see what happens in 3 days, and then the implication is 3 days later. We find out that Grover Tully is dead and the logjam is ended, and perhaps he can then get this army that he went to the Riverlands for. So why might that make him cry? Because he has, perhaps for the first time, certainly the first time this season, he has actually asked for help. He's not just done it on his own. The whole idea about him going to Harrenhal, I mean, when you think about it, it's just one man and a dragon went to Harrenhal and basically tried to take over it all and boss everyone around, and it just did not work. And now here he finally admits that he needs help. He can't just do it himself. And so that is an emotional moment for him because he asked for help and it worked. So that, I think, is the kind of the feel that we're supposed to get from this, is that this is a journey for him to become, I mean, to say a better person is probably not really giving it the gravitas that it deserves, but that's the kind of feel. He now understands that he doesn't have to do everything on his own. Lady Sophia Valarion, thank you very much for the super chat, saying, "Greetings, Robert, moderators, and IDG Live fans. In a few hours, I'll be celebrating my birthday, 726. I assume that's the 26th of July, not 726th birthday. That would be quite impressive. So excited to spend it all with you. Well, a happy name day to you. I feel quite honoured that you wish to spend your birthday with me. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a fantastic day filled with fun festivities, family and friends. That would be a wonderful thing. Let's go to a question from Ranabir Mitra. Another question from Ranabir saying, "Are you like me, hoping that the dragon in the veil eventually sees Rhaena and instead turns away and leaves, unlike what's rumored to eventually happen?" Joke. Okay, so another issue that happened in this was the fact that Rhaena goes over to the Vale, which she does in the book, and she goes there with 3 of the younger Team Black members. It was just the one. It was just Joffrey in the book, and the dragon eggs and the tiny dragons. But here she's very much feeling as if she's given just like a slightly demeaning task. She should be. Her sister's a dragon rider. Her sister's going out there doing, almost part of the war. Well, really part of the war effort, even if she's not seen full battle yet. But Rhaena's there. She's not got a dragon, and she's being asked to babysit for all of the children. So she's feeling frustrated. She arrives over in the Vale, and what we have this episode is her stumbling across what is very clearly where a dragon was. And so she talks to Lady Jane Arryn, and it's like, oh yeah, we've got a dragon. Did I not mention that? That bit doesn't quite work for me. I have to say this, like, oh, I didn't. Sorry, we've got a dragon, and it's no biggie. That didn't quite work for me. But we have this wild dragon, who I think most of the fandom are assuming is going to be Sheepstealer, who in the book was a wild dragon, but on Dragonstone. Now, and I should put the spoiler warning here for anyone who's new to this channel. The spoiler policy we have here is that book spoilers are fine. I will happily talk about what happens next in the book. Show spoilers are not okay. I will happily talk about what happened in previous episodes. I will happily talk about what happens in the trailers and things like that. But anything which is leaked or anything like that, thankfully this time I don't think it has. There was a leak last week. This time I've not seen anything. I don't think anyone else has, so I don't think we need to worry about it. But show spoilers are not okay. What happens in the book probably will happen on the show, but as we've seen in this episode, not necessarily. So that's the spoiler warning. Anyway, Sheepstealer in the book. Sheepstealer is claimed by Nettles, who's a character who appears a little bit after the rest of the Dragonseeds, and nobody really knows where she's come from, who she is. She seems to be able to claim Sheepstealer just by gaining Sheepstealer's trust. Here's a sheep. Next day, here's another sheep. Next day, here's another sheep. I know you like sheep. Have another one. And that seemed to be the way that Nettles worked. Now, the working assumption on some people, it has to be said, is that Nettles isn't going to appear. Rayna is instead going to be taking Nettles' place. And so the plot line that we have later on with Daemon when he's getting close to Nettles actually is just him getting close to his daughter, which I kind of get, and that kind of makes sense. What I will say is that I mean, maybe this is just the eternal optimist in me. I don't know. I've not 100% given up on Nettles appearing yet. I don't think that this means necessarily 100% that just because we've seen that there is a dragon in the Vale of Arryn, that means that Rayna's going to be the one riding the dragon. A lot of people have come to that conclusion. I don't think that's necessarily the case. What could happen, I don't know. I've not seen the episode. I don't know anyone who has seen the episode. What could happen is that Rayna thinks, maybe I could get this dragon, but then finds that there's somebody else here who is very slowly getting closer to this dragon. And that's how we meet Nettles. So I can't yet 100% say we're not going to have Nettles. It's looking likely, I will say that, but it's not yet 100%. So anyone who's telling you that this means that she's definitely out, it's not quite true yet. Martin saying, since they have dragon DNA, has there ever been any gender bending among Targaryens? Any deformed babies among the small folk with dragon seeds? Well, we don't know. So with the dragon seeds, we don't read in the book. We don't tend to read about them. We only really find out about them at this point in the story, so we don't know. The implication is that this has been going on for a long time. The Lord's right to the first night carried on Dragonstone for probably a good century and a half. So, and maybe even more actually. So there may well be lots of dragon seeds out there. We're not told about them. They just are part of the population in Dragonstone. Might we see what did you say? Gender bending among Targaryens. For those who don't know what the context to this is. Dragon's Septon Bath, who George R. Martin has confirmed is right about most things when it comes to dragons. Septon Bath basically says that dragons can change gender. And we haven't had a 100% confirmation that that's true, just that's something he asserts, and he's right about most things. So does that mean because Targaryens have got a little bit of dragon DNA in them, which is our working assumption, that we might expect to see changing genders within Targaryens? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think we've got any obvious examples there. But I'm happy in the chat if you want to let me know if I've missed an obvious example of something. Then do please let me know. Jewel Elson, thank you very much for the super sticker. Yeah, the other thing I would just say about Nettles, which is something I did a long sort of Twitter thread. If you're on Twitter X, then I'm on there. Do go and check it out. And this was a couple of weeks ago, so the world has changed since then. But I did a thread which basically said, let's not panic about Nettles, because she actually appears after the dragon seeds. When we think about, if you're a book person, you'll know what I mean by that. So we get the what's happened on the show so far is that they tried with Sir Stefan Darklyn, and then we've got one dragon going out to Sea Smoke goes out to Admiral Velaryon, but in the book we get Vermithor and Silverwing, and we get a number of dragon seeds, bastard children of Targaryens, or people who claim they have some Targaryen heritage, get a chance to try and bond with the dragon. And that's where we get Ulf White, and that's where we get Hugh Hammer coming in. And after that, some time after that, we don't know how long, but a period of time after that, Nettles appears. So they think they've done it. They think they've got the three previously ridden dragons have got new riders, and they think that's probably it. And then out of nowhere, Nettles appears. So just on the show's own timeline, we're 6 episodes in. When do you think that Hugh Hammer and Ulf White are going to be claiming dragons? I mean, maybe next episode? It would be quite tight for them both, given the fact that there's no real lead up. We had a little bit perhaps with Ulf White when he was there in the pub or whatever it was, and he was listening to people talking about Rhaenyra. Maybe they could do a jump cut to him being on Dragonstone next episode. Hugh Hammer, similarly, I mean, he's there. He seems to be in King's Landing. Yes, he wants to leave, but there has to be some kind of build up to him going to Dragonstone. So, will we get the Dragon Seeds next episode, or is that episode 8? Either way, in terms of the book timing, we shouldn't expect Nettles to appear yet. So, I think I would just sort of say the suggestion of what we've seen so far on the show is that maybe Nettles isn't happening, but I wouldn't say it's 100% yet. I think there's still a chance. Commander Ray, with a free super chat for being a channel member for 8 months. Well, thank you so much. I hugely appreciate that. And yeah, I should say channel membership, you can do that on YouTube if you wish to support this channel. That's an easy way to do that. And you get basically free super chats. Your comments in the YouTube chat will be all in color, and I will be able to see them nice and easily, because the chat goes through quite quickly, and I won't be able. I can't pick up on most things that people say, unfortunately. But if it's there in bright colors, then I can. The best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, is through Patreon, and there's a link down in the description. So I will do an early thank you to my patrons. Thank you very much. I hugely appreciate your support. I genuinely cannot do what I do without your support. So thank you. But Commander Ray saying, to Robert for the great content and the mods for being so good. I hope we get more of the true King Paddy, even if it's just a vision. Yeah, let's do a quick shout out. Paddy Considine. There are so many things in this episode. If this were just like a random episode and then Paddy Considine came back, the fandom, I suspect, would be lapping it up. He would be the center of attention because he was so good in season 1. It's just that so many other things happen in this episode that perhaps we're not as over the moon as we otherwise would be. But yeah, Paddy Considine being back, and I think again, such a strong character. Yeah, hat tip to him. Let's go to a question from Riley and others are just saying thank you to the moderators. Yes, moderators, let's do that. An early thank you to the moderators. Moderators do a fantastic job here. If you're here in the chat, just enjoying it, supportive, happy atmosphere that's also incredibly nerdy in a very, very good way, then that's because of the moderators. They are amazing. They do a fantastic job. Could you just show them a little bit of love? I would hugely appreciate it. And from me personally, moderators, thank you. Okay, let's do question from Randy Mitra. Third question, actually, asked: do you feel the showrunners and George R. R. Martin have a contractual obligation to make sure House of the Dragon and the Dunk and Egg shows tie in closely to the old Game of Thrones show? I just can't personally understand why there is a need for this, because there is clearly an opportunity to carve a fresh show canon which is more closely linked to the books, but alas. Okay, so this is an interesting one. George R. R. Martin's position on this is reasonably clear as far as we can tell. If you go back to, I think it was probably 2 years ago, History of Westeros, friends of the channel did an interview with George R. R. Martin, and I think I've said it many times. I think this is one of the most important, in terms of the nerdy fandom, one of the most important interviews that we've got with him, because he sets out very clearly his view that there's book canon and there's show canon. They're two separate things. So things that happen on the show doesn't necessarily impact on what's happening in the books. He's got 100% control over the books. The show, he's got an influence, but that's slightly different. But he views himself as having two key roles. Now, this may change over time, but at the moment, he views himself as having two key roles. Key role number one is to try to keep every TV show as close as possible in terms of canon to the books. So he is always trying. He gets a chance. He talks to the showrunners. He is involved in development. He's not been there like in the writer's room of any of these shows, but he has been actively involved. And part of his role is, as he sees it, to ensure that the show is as close as possible to book canon. His second role, as he sees it, is to make sure that all of the shows are as close as possible to each other, to create a cohesive second canon. So we've got the main canon, the book canon, and then we've got a second canon, which is the show canon. So at the moment, he sees that as his role. I don't think it should be, and bless History of Westeros for suggesting this to him, that maybe there are other people who can help him out with that. But at the moment, he sees his role as being there to try and make sure that each of the TV shows sticks as close as possible to each other. Why does he want that? Well, I suspect it's to stop there being a gazillion different versions of the truth. The way he would like it is that, yeah, there's this one version of canon, which is his books. That's something he's got control of. And then you get show canon. He wants that to stay the same. They've done certain things. So Aegon the VI didn't exist in show canon. The Night King does exist. Then, all of these things that you've got going on in it, the ending to Game of Thrones happened in show canon, and all of that works its way through into the other TV shows. So when they change a bit of history in the TV shows, then that applies theoretically to all of the TV shows. And that is a lot easier than having a gazillion different versions. If you just imagine for 1 second you had a House of the Dragon had completely ignored what happened in Game of Thrones and they'd just gone with a different version of something or other, that would just make it a lot harder for everyone to understand what's going on. So I sort of understand it. Is it a contractual obligation on their part? I mean, I haven't seen the contracts. I guess probably not, but it is certainly something, and this is probably even more important, it's certainly something George R. R. Martin himself finds important. Partia 1 Pressure 3 saying thoughts on the wall being a line of weirwood trees to pump water up with tied white walkers to make it cold. Tied up white walkers to make it cold. Oh wow. I've not heard of this theory before, but so the wall is weirwood trees in a long line, and then they're pumping water up, and then white walkers are strapped to them to freeze it. I mean, I like the thinking, but that doesn't strike me as. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence for that. Is the way I would say that the. I guess the argument is that the others bring with them the cold comes with them, and so yes, you could freeze it as you go. The way that we've been told, I mean, and this is where a lot of my kind of theorizing comes from, is that do we need another explanation? And most of the time is no. What we've been told is the wall started out, it was actually it was a normal sized wall. And we had spells put into its base, but then over the years, and this is thousands of years, remember, over the years, then each generation of Night's Watch would sort of add on a little bit. They'd bring some more stones up to just make sure that the walkway, they didn't slip too much on the walkway. That just added up over the decades, centuries, millennia. An extra layer, that would freeze, more water would freeze, and that would be the way it would keep on growing. And do we need another explanation? Personally, I can't see the need for it. I like the thinking, but I can't see that we need anything more. Let's go to a question from Martin S. Hi there, Martin. Saying, what does Mississippi Burning, 1988, and the Two Towers, these are films, and the Two Towers in 2002 have in common? Brad Dourif's character gets thrown in both films by Gene Hackman's FBI agent and Theoden's guards, respectively. Good movie fact. I like it. Thank you very much, Martin. I hugely appreciate that. Lady Pushkin saying, I noticed on some Fire and Blood covers there's one where the dragon has 4 legs. Yeah, so this is George R. R. Martin is very focused on the fact that in his world dragons have 2 legs, and then the 4 arms or whatever they are, that's where the wings come from. It's not 4 legs and then wings coming out from the side. So he's written, I mean, a large part of his most recent blog post is about that point. It's a point he's made several times before. He gets particularly annoyed by the Targaryen sigil, which is a 3-headed dragon with 2 legs. And then on the TV show, from the end of season 5 of Game of Thrones onwards, they turned it into one with 4 legs. That seemed to really annoy him. And then House of the Dragon seemed to have kept up the 4 legs thing, which seems to have continued to annoy him. So what has happened since he's done that blog post is that a number of people have gone and found other examples of where, creeping into the wider George R. R. Martin verse, there are pictures of dragons with 4 legs that he's obviously either just ignored or got overruled on in some way. There's one of the pictures from one of the official calendars has Dragonstone, which is full of Dragonstone in the books is full of stone dragons, basically, and they have 4 legs, and that seems to have got through somehow. So the idea that there's Fire and Blood covers, there's one with 4 legs. He doesn't tick off every single cover across the world. So yeah, he will have been annoyed and frustrated with that, I have no doubt. Carolina Clay saying if he didn't want a gazillion versions of the truth, he shouldn't have written Fire and Blood the way he did. That's a fair point. And agree. Weirwood saying is the wall White Walker theory is Michael talks about stuff. His video. Yeah, I have heard of this channel. I think I've seen it. I think I've seen a video. I can't remember what the video was. But from what I've seen, here's me doing a quick shout out. So Michael, there is a link in the chat. Carl Karsnark, thank you very much for putting it there. Michael talks about stuff. There's a lot of Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones videos, and from what I've seen, they are trying to come at things from a different angle, a new way. And I like that. I think that one of the problems with any kind of nerdy community is we kind of get into this groupthink where we all think exactly the same thing because we've seen everything for so long. And it's great when someone comes in from a completely different angle and just challenges us. So I approve. That's really good. So do go over there and send him my love. I don't know whether I don't know this person. I've never met them, but I'm happily welcoming them into the community. Let's go. Somebody was asking if we're going to see Cannibal. I think probably Cannibal the Dragon. Probably not this season. We may do briefly next season. My instinct is that they want to limit the amount of new Targaryens and dragons that they've got. They are very aware on the show of the fact that we've got Targaryens, all of these silver blonde haired people with very similar sounding names, and dragons. Yes, they've made efforts to make them all look different, but to the casual viewer, a dragon's a dragon. So they've seemingly tried to restrict the amount of dragons we saw, first of all, in season 1, and now what we have in season 2. And I think that probably Cannibal, if they were having their meeting, they would have gone, do we need Cannibal in this season? And I think the answer is no, we don't need Cannibal. In the same way, Darren, who's down in Old Town now, maybe we'll see Darren in the last episode or 2, but generally speaking, him and just Sarah and his dragon, they're next season thing. Let's go to Lady Von Strauss saying, has there been any suggestion that the cat's paw dagger or the prophecy dagger, which is the same thing, if you've not picked up on that, the dagger that or knife that Viserys had, that has the prince that was promised a kind of prophecy on it, that Aegon then picked up, that Aemund then seems to have claimed from Aegon. Is there any that many years later was the dagger which was used on the TV show, first of all, to be trying to kill Bran, and then was used by Arya to kill the Night King. So show canon, hugely important. Is it possible that this is reworked from the last hero's broken sword? Is it possible that broken sword was always more dagger-like? But it appeared halved or broken to the eyes of much larger humans. Could the entire size of this thing be a miscommunication between races that has muddied over the eons? Well, I think most things are possible when it comes to going back in history. George R. R. Martin has said again and again and again, in his world, when we're reading about stuff that happened in the Age of Heroes, we shouldn't just take it as literal truth. And I think we sometimes do take it as this is what happened. These are legends. These are myths. These are things that happened so long ago, nobody can remember the exact truth. There are undoubtedly some truths in there that we can pull out, but as a whole, no. As a whole, they're not exactly right. So, might one of the inaccuracies be the fact that the last hero sword, that in the legend of the last hero that we have, this is the first men stories of the first long night, the last hero goes out and it gets very cold, and it gets so cold that his sword freezes and breaks. Now, might that therefore be just a kind of a monomyth of actually this was um, a a dagger or a knife, really, and there's just a legend created as to why it got broken and why it was so short? I get that. I get the logic. I think there are a couple of things here to say. The first thing is that the knife that we're talking about is Valyrian steel. And Valyrian steel, as far as we're aware, was invented by the Valyrians in the Valyrian Freehold, which happened after the First Long Night. So that technology seems not to have been there. Might they have taken the metal that was in the last hero sword and reworked it into that? I guess so. But at the same time, uh, this is a House Targaryen thing. This is a House Targaryen heirloom. They seem to have got this knife and had a prophecy kind of like forged into it in some way. If this really was the relic of the hero who saved the world, then probably wouldn't just be held by what seems to have been a mid-ranking to low-ranking Valyrian house. This would have been a treasure of the state. So my instinct is here says no. One thing I would say, though, is that broken sword, as well as being clearly a trope and also clearly a Tolkien thing, and George R. R. Martin loves Tolkien, the broken sword does exist also in the kind of the mirror legend of Azor Ahai, in that he's trying to forge his sword, and it's only on the third time that he succeeds. The first two times it doesn't, sword shatters. So we have a shattered sword on both sides of this, which does seem to imply that perhaps a shattered sword is part of this. And I would say by pure coincidence that, but it almost certainly isn't pure coincidence, what happens in the prologue to book one. The very first time we see the others, Waymar Royce is there fighting away, and then it's so cold that his sword shatters. So basically, I think what we've got is that this is trying to show how cold this was. So cold that steel shatters, and we need something that is special, different, magical. So that, I think, perhaps is my interpretation of this kind of monomyth that we've got going on here. Question from Magma Frost. Over the past few days, I've seen a number of possible interpretations of Helena's crickets. They may be symbolic, such as representing Alicent losing her seat at the small council, or Aegon losing the ability to rule, or they may be prophetic, and it could mean that Seasmoke stopped singing when he was claimed, while Vermithor and Silverwing still sing, or perhaps it's something about Daeron's future. Actually, just complete aside here, they are pronouncing this Daeron on the TV show, and this is it's not the first time this has happened to me. I've pronounced this word Daeron all the way through. I suspect over the course of the next year or so, I'm going to start to shift to pronounce it Daeron, because that's what's on the TV show, and that therefore is what people understand. I always find it quite amusing when the pronunciation that you've used for a very long time, the TV show have decided a slightly different one, and so you kind of have to go with that. Complete digression. It happened with me with Rhaenys, who I'd called Rhaenys for many, many years. And then it was pointed out to me what happens if you take that pronunciation and use it for the Targaryen king that we call Aenys. If you take Rhaenys and then apply the same pronunciation there, it can be easily misinterpreted. But here we get the character I used to call Darren, and I will now probably start calling Darren. Anyway, so is this Helena's crickets? Is this perhaps something about Darren's future? We're told that he's musically gifted in the previous scene, after all. I think it has to be referencing a trio in some capacity, as there were 3 crickets, where one member has undergone a significant change and the other 2 haven't. Do you find any of these interpretations compelling? Do you think the crickets are symbolic, prophetic, or perhaps even neither? Okay, it's a really interesting question. So for those who missed this, in the episode, you get Alicent, who goes in. So she's been sort of pushed out of the council, and she goes to her daughter, to Helena, and says, we should light some candles for all those we've lost. And Helena is there, and she's staring at him. She seems to love insects. And she has these little mini cages, and it seems that inside them she's got crickets. And then she just sort of says, one of the crickets, this one, has stopped singing. And Alicent doesn't pick up on it, which is not unusual. Alicent doesn't seem to. Do keep in mind, though, Ryan Condal did say that a character has noticed that Helena has these kind of prophetic moments. So watch out in the last couple of episodes. Is there someone who has noticed this? And if so, what does that mean? But anyway, Alicent doesn't, and she drags Helena off to light a few candles for people, and then the riot happens, and we kind of forget about this. But we've got these 3 small cages with crickets in. One of them isn't singing. What might that mean? Well, I think, yes, probably, given how much of Helena's character is about prophetic words, this is prophetic in some way. What might it mean? Well, you could interpret it. I think this is actually quite good in terms of prophecy, in that it's not 100% clear. You could interpret it in a number of different ways. You could interpret it as being her, Aemond, and Aegon, the 3 siblings who are in King's Landing, and Aegon stopped singing. He can't talk, he can't do things. That's it. My personal preference is that this is about the 3 dragons on that have previously been ridden on Dragonstone. We have Vermithor, we have Silverwing, and we have Seasmoke. And one of them has stopped singing. Now, the dragons are associated with singing because we've had a couple of times now people singing to them to try and encourage them to be bonding with a rider in some way. And we've had Seasmoke who's been restless, who's been lonely. The suggestion is made, and is therefore kind of almost rejecting the song. So that would be my kind of interpretation. This is before Seasmoke claims Adam Velaryon in the episode. So my instinct is that this is what this is talking about. This is about the fact that one of the dragons has stopped singing. I got a couple of questions in the chat. Marcus Rissman saying Essos has played, and this is your first super chat, so thank you very much. Essos has played a peripheral role in House of the Dragon, but might enter the show more clearly now. Do you think we will see the Roger family in the future, with that as an Easter egg for book readers? So yeah, we will see a bit more of the Triarchy. Now, it's quite interesting that in the Green Council, they very much I mean, it was bordering on ethnocentricity, really, with the way that they say, "Oh, you can't trust those members of the triarchy. They're all this, they're all that." So we've got, and we have seen from one of the trailers that Tywin Lannister does go over there and seemingly get involved in a wrestling match. I don't know quite how that fits in yet, but he tries to get the Triarchy on board. So we will see the Triarchy, and they do have a role in the books. Otto actually writes to them in the books, and they finally agree to do this and help join Team Green, and their intervention is quite significant. Will we get, in line with that, will we get something that is a nod to the Regier family? I think, I mean, maybe. It's the short answer. Maybe not this season, maybe next season. If we have any hope of having the Regency as the a sort of a season 5 of this or whatever it is, then I think they need to introduce the idea of the Regier family, because otherwise it's all a bit random what happens. So Easter egg, yes, possibly, but more likely to be next season than this one, I think. DM Collins saying, if they turn every sibling into a twin, call Lionel Peter Pettigrew, reveal that Alice Rivers is mushroom wearing a glamour, I will survive. But if they remove Nettles, I will remove my own face. Yeah, so this is one of the... So Nettles is a character that people love, it has to be said. And I don't think there's any way to go around this. I think that the showrunner and the writing team are aware. I still believe Ryan Condal is one of us, in as much as he is a mega fan of George R. R. Martin and he loves it and he's nerds over it. The changes that are made, as far as I can tell, are decisions not because they don't like what was in the original. They are decisions because they think this would work better on TV. I think that's quite an important distinction there. So the decision to remove Nettles, they will be aware, will be a huge one. Now, as I say, it feels like not everyone, but a lot of people have jumped to the conclusion that what happened in episode 6 means we're not getting Nettles. I would not say that's 100% yet. We could still get Nettles. Ask me again this time next week. Maybe I'll have changed my mind. I was very certain at the beginning of the season, very certain that we should get Nettles, and that certainty has come down over the season. But it's not all the way down yet. There is still a chance. And for those who don't know why, I mean, partly it's because this is really great representation and a really great chance to explore the ins and outs of who could be a dragon rider and how can you bond with a dragon. And it's also partly because this adds a real softening moment to the end of Daemon's story. At the end of this, so in the book, very broadly what happens is he's there, joins up with Rhaenyra to take King's Landing, and then he heads off and meets Nettles, and the two of them are then teamed up until the end, when he heads off to face Aemond. And it's almost as if he's kind of moved on from Rhaenyra, and who is she? Is she his lover? Is she a relative of his? A lot of people have said, "Oh well, they must be setting this up for Rhaena. He can spend this time with Rhaena, and she is his daughter, and that kind of follows the arc they seem to be going on the TV show." But I like Nettles in the book. I hope they've not got rid of Nettles. and I don't think that you need to boost up Rayner. I think you can have him have that character arc without Rayner taking Nettles' role in the story. Paul Taylor, a lot of chat about why Adam got sea smoke. Could it be as simple as him smelling a lot like his half brother? I think that's the implication, to be honest. So the way this is set up on the show, I mean, forget books for the moment. The way they set this up on the show was that Rhaenyra decided Sea Smoke is getting lonely, needs a new rider. And so she tries to introduce somebody who she thinks has got the strongest link across to the Targaryens. Sea Smoke goes, no, not him, and then flies off and then hunts down the person who is closest to his former rider. That's who he wants. He's been missing his former rider, and he finds this here. This is the half brother of Laenor. And that's the way they set it up. This idea that it's not the human who chooses the dragon, it's the dragon that chooses the human. This has been set up in book as well as show. But here, this is the biggest single example we've got of that actually happening. And it's as simple as him smelling a lot like his half brother. I don't know whether I'd say necessarily just the smell, but it's like, I want somebody like Laenor. I'm missing Laenor, and that seems to be it. DM Collins saying, dang it, that was supposed to say Larys Strong. I screwed up my joke. I'm now removing my own face. DM Collins, sorry, I now have to go back and scroll back. Saying, if they turn every sibling into a twin, call Larys Peter Pettigrew. Okay, I get it now. So yes, so Peter Pettigrew, for those who don't know, in the Harry Potter stories, he can turn into a rat, and the theory is that perhaps Larys can also walk into rats. So yes, I get that. Thank you. Good clarification. I apologize for not picking up on that one. G. Joe, thank you very much, saying season 1, episode 10, so last season. Rhaenyra seemed ready to go to war after her son's death. Season 2 is all about hesitation and avoiding the war. She and Alicent appear weak and without an agenda. They're more objects than subjects. So this is an interesting point. So thank you for raising it. The direction for the end of season 1, if you remember it, was so Daemon goes in and he just kind of, we don't hear it, but we just see it, and he kind of whispers in Rhaenyra's ear and obviously tells her Luke is dead, Lucerys is dead. And the direction is that she turns to the camera with, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was like her eyes are full of war. So they set that up at the end of season 1 to be like, she now wants war. Season 2, however, she kind of slows down. So is this a shift? Yes-ish, I get. So what happened with season 2 clearly is that they've given her more of an arc rather than just, right, I'm now going to war. She doesn't go straight to war, and you have to ask why. And the reason is because first of all, she's mourning her son, which is the same pretty much in the books. And then also because she, more than anyone else, realizes quite how damaging this is going to be, quite how many people are going to die and be hurt because of this war. So is it a step down? Yes, it is. I think there's no way of going around that, but they got to a suitably dramatic point at the end of season 1, and let's not forget, when they didn't have a pilot, it was straight to season order. So this was their point at which they kind of leave off, and they didn't know at the time they made that, they did not know, are they going to get a second season? They didn't know it was going to be a massive hit. They didn't know anything. So they end it, and that the arc of season one is, and finally we're going to get a war that's been building up all of this time. So I completely understand why they ended it there. And then there was this just tiny reset in terms of characterization. I'll forgive them that. I think you're absolutely right to pick up on it, but I kind of understand. And Martin S saying, anachronism aside, how would a duel between Kristen Cole and Oberyn Martell go? Oh, interesting. I will happily throw this to the chat. I will answer just one moment. But chat, if you're there, just write Cole or Martell. Who do you think would win in a matchup between those two? And before I see what everyone else says, let me have a quick think. So Kristen Cole is clearly good in jousting and contests and things like that. He beats Daemon and both of the Cargill twins. And from what we see, he seems pretty capable. Oberyn Martell, in a real fight, basically beat the mountain. And yeah, he died in the end, but the only reason he died was because he was gloating and he wanted the mountain to say something. If this was like a normal battle, he would have just moved on from there. He got rid of him, he'll move on to the next one. So my instinct is that firstly, the fighting skills from Oberyn Martell are probably slightly better. The dexterity movement definitely better, and also the poisons. Oberyn Martell happily used poisons, whereas Kristen Cole, as far as we're aware, never did, and he seems to have tried to hold out to some kind of. I mean, I hesitate to say there was a moral code that Kristen Cole had, but I think you know what I mean. Right, let's go to quickly flicking through the chat. What do people say? Martell's, Oberyn all day. Oberyn, 06 Keely saying Cole if it's a clean and fair fight, but probably wouldn't be. Martell. Yeah, it sounds to me like everybody's agreeing. Oh, no, I've got a couple of Coles here. So James Horner says Cole, Nomis says Cole, but everybody else pretty much, and Kind Bock saying Cole, but pretty much everyone else is saying Martell. Okay, there we go. So yeah, and somebody said, reminds me of Bronn. This is Fred says. Oh, it says Cole reminds of Bronn. I was going to actually go the other way around, actually. One of the archetypes that George R. R. Martin uses a lot is this idea of a heavily armored, slowly moving knight/fighter against more nimble fighter who perhaps doesn't play 100% by the rules, doesn't have all of the armor, but is able to dodge and move and just wait for the other person to get tired. And that happens in the fight, if you remember, in the Eyrie, when Bronn is there as Tyrion's champion. Happens with the fight with Oberyn in the mountain and a couple of other places as well. And this is a trope that he loves. And the person who wins that is the light, the nimble, the character who perhaps his brain is moving faster. Let's go to a question from Lady Pushkins saying, I wonder if George R. R. Martin was inspired by Mother Shipton for the Ghost of High Heart. I'd love this. Yeah, for those who don't know Mother Shipton, she's a mystic, probably is the best way of putting it, in England from the 1600s, I think. She was born in a cave and spent a lot of time in and around and living in that cave, and she was prophetic, and she told the fortunes of many things that happened around that time. And you can still go today. It's up in, if you're in the UK, it's somewhere in Yorkshire, I believe, Mother Shipton's Cave. And yeah, so she was just this old bent over woman who knew the future. So might George R. R. Martin have been inspired by Mother Shipton? I mean, possibly. I don't think I've heard it say that would be the case, but possibly. Um, Lady Pushkin's also saying, I'm a bit disappointed with Damon's story this season. What do you think? I think his conscience could have been dealt with in one episode. Yeah, so I mean, I kind of struggle with this for the simple reason that I actually quite like this. Wasn't anything in the book. This did not happen at all. We're basically told he goes to Harrenhal. We're explicitly told that Alice Rivers seemed to have no effect on him. He gathers an army, then he moves on. So that's pretty much it. So all of this story that we've had, the visions, everything, this is show only stuff. Now, I get that they were wanting to, I mean, at a very basic level, pad out the story a little bit because they haven't got huge amounts of actual story to go on at this point. Which, and just try and, I don't know if this is justifying it, but just unpick what I mean by that is that there's not much story that we have. We get an account in Fire and the Blood of things that happened, and then not much characterization, not much motivations, just here's the things that happened. And so in this period, the period that is covered by season 2 is, I mean, I haven't counted, but it's not many pages, actually. It's a relatively small section of Fire and Blood. So if they wished to keep the pace that we had there of what should be happening with the things that they're like the Blood and Cheese, the Cargill twins, with the Rook's Rest, etc., etc. If they wanted to keep those things at a reasonable pace, not just squish them all into the equivalent of one episode, then they did have to have extra stuff in there. So I kind of understand the dilemma that the writers had at this point. Now, putting Damon in here is interesting because it means that we've got this character who is more than anyone else this season going on a character arc. He has, or he will end up, presumably, a very different kind of character. And we do have this kind of hint at the very end of his story in Fire and Blood, where he's been like this, lit firework just going off all over the place. But then at the very end, Aemond meets him and says, "You've lived too long, uncle." And Damon says, "On that we agree." And that always feels quite jarring in the book because it's like, this guy, what sucked the life out of him? What made him think I've lived too long? He's the guy who was like at the epicenter of everything that happened. Something happened to him. Was it Nettles? How did that impact on him? We're not told. So they have to somehow, in this season and next season, show us how he reaches the point of him going, I've lived too long. So I get it. And I really love the fact that we're seeing more of Harrenhal, that they've set up Harrenhal to be so clearly impacted by the Weirwood network. I love the fact that they've shown us a lot more of Alice Rivers. I love the Simon Strong. I think Simon Russell Beale has done a fantastic job with him. I think he's a really fun character. So I like all of that, but I understand why people are a bit frustrated. I completely understand is that he was moving around 100 miles an hour, then suddenly he's just stopped. and he's here in Harrenhal, and he's not achieving anything. So the action is more character action rather than moving the plot forward every episode kind of action. So I get it. I'm putting this under one of the things I said at the very beginning of this live stream. There are a lot of changes in this episode from the books. Some I liked, some I wasn't so sure on, some I'm withholding judgment until I see what they do with it. This is one of those ones I'm withholding judgment until I see what they do with it. I understand it. I think it kind of makes sense. Let's see how it feels in the wider arc of Damon's story. It feels like it's really long and drawn out because in our real time we've been watching it over the course of a month. People watching it back later, people binge watching this. This is just going to be a short bit, but we'll see. Andrew Kay saying, in a way, the visions seem very necessary for Damon on House of the Dragon. The portrayal has been much more negative than the text, so it's a redemptive path of sorts. Yes. I mean, I didn't know whether I necessarily agree that he's portrayed in a worse way in the show than in the book. They've shown us a few bits of that, but not. I think there is. The way I read the character in the book was quite negative, it has to be said. And Adam Geets saying, hi, Robert and Dan. Why do you think we've never seen a Targaryen serve as a Kingsguard? Obviously, this would have only made sense when there were too many Targaryens. We saw a couple join the Maesters, but never become a Kingsguard. There was actually one who was a member of the Kingsguard. He's a guy called Aemon the Dragon Knight, who is quite legendary. He's one of the legendary members of the Kingsguard, and he served under 5 kings. He was the second son of Viserys II. So the baby Viserys that we see in House of the Dragon, that's Daemon and Rhaenyra's son. It's his second son. So we're actually not looking too far into the future here. We're talking like a couple of decades' time he's going to get born. So he serves in his elder brother Aegon will become king, will be Aegon the Fourth, who is not he was known as Aegon the Unworthy, not generally recognized as a good king, and Aemon is recognized as a kind of an opposite. He is the upright member of the Kingsguard. He is, the true knight. He is the person who stands up for virtue and things like that. So, he is there. He's the only one that we do get, Targaryen that we do get in the Kingsguard, but he's held up as a pretty good one. Let's go. Callie Summers saying, if they do blend Nettles and Rhaena, I hope it means no Daemon and Nettles. Is that a line Targaryens wouldn't cross in world either, or just very rarely? If you're talking about a romantic relationship between Daemon and Rhaena, then I don't think so. If they go down the route, which they might, they might go down the route that Rhaena claims sheep stealer, and then Daemon, chastened by the kind of the dream vision of Lena saying, "Are you looking after our girls?" And it's like, no. And then he goes and spends some good father-daughter time with Rhaena. I don't think that would be going to a romantic relationship. That's just him being a good dad moment, which kind of has the potential, if they go down that route, has the potential for Daemon for a lot of this, for season 3 to actually not be a particularly proactive character, to actually just be someone who's trying to be a good person for the first time. So we'll see. I still don't say it's 100%. I think if they decide not to include Nettles, it's because they've gone down the Rayner route. But yeah, I'm not going to put an actual percentage to it, but it's not 100%. Okay, let's go to Andrew Cage is clarifying, saying more negative. I meant the show has heightened and more defined Damon's ambitions compared to the text, and added scenes like the Rhaenyra choking, etc., that made him less than sympathetic. Yeah, no, I understand. Absolutely, I think they definitely added some scenes to make him come across as less sympathetic. Snowgirl saying, "Hi Robert, hope you're well." I am, thank you. I am a linguist, so I can't help but get a little hung up on linguistic details. This is the kind of nerdy stuff we love. So you're very welcome. In this case, I'm hung up on the question of whether the Dragon Sunfire would have reacted faster to Aegon's commands if they had all been in Valyrian. As you pointed out a week or so ago, George R. R. Martin's dragons, unlike Tolkien's, do not speak, so it's not like they would have learned Valyrian from their parents and other dragons around them. I presume they learned a few words of command from whoever their rider is, and I don't see why it should matter which language is used for these commands at the outset. So, wouldn't Sunfire have learned all his spoken commands from Aegon? If so, whatever language Aegon used should have been fine, unless there's something magical about the High Valyrian language. So, is there any evidence that there's something magical about Valyrian, or are fans just making assumptions? Is the fact that most dragon riders speak to their dragons in Valyrian just a cultural tradition? So, interesting stuff. Now, this was something that was highlighted partly actually in the inside the episode mini video that they produced for episode 4, pardon me, 4 or whatever it was, the one with the Rook's Rest. And one of the things which was noted was the way that Aegon, unlike most of the other Targaryens, Aegon was just there riding Sunfire. It's like, go on, attack! Not all speaking to it. In Valyrian, so this was shown there, or explained there, as being like a character thing, is that he hasn't bothered to really learn Valyrian, as we see, so he's just talking to his dragon in the language he understands. And it was kind of left hanging, this idea that maybe therefore the dragon he's not in tune with the dragon, the dragon isn't responding as well or as quickly. So the challenge is that if a dragon is learning from its rider, then it doesn't really matter, does it? Unless there's something special about the language of Valyrian. So it's possible there's something special or magical about the Valyrian language. But I completely understand your point that there's no reason that we've been told so far why a dragon should necessarily only follow instructions in Valyrian. The one thing I would add to this is that one thing which I really liked the House of the Dragon have done is introduced, or expanded, I should say, this idea of the Dragon Keepers. The Dragon Keepers, and you know the guys, they were there with Steffon Darklyn. There were like 4 of them, and they got the big sticks, and they speak Valyrian, and they're looking after the dragons. They do exist in the books, but they're more guards. Jaehaerys introduced them, and the idea is that they're there to be sort of like guarding where the dragons are, to make sure nobody's going to nip in and steal any dragon eggs, like Alyssa Farman did, for example, or attack any baby dragons or anything along those lines. The dragons are the most important thing the Targaryens have. They need to be protecting them. So what the show has done is expanded that role out and said that this preceded Jaehaerys. And actually, these people, they're not just guards. They're like the staff who are looking after the dragons. So when the dragon rider gets off and wanders away, they are there sort of telling the dragon, now it's your time to go to bed. And they're there presumably feeding the dragon, and they're there also teaching it a few things, and they seem to be speaking exclusively in High Valyrian. So that's a long preamble to a small asterisk. I agree with what you say. It shouldn't theoretically make a difference if the dragon, if Sunfire had learned from Aegon these commands, it shouldn't make a difference. But whether it's normal, sort of common language or Valyrian. However, small asterisk, dragons have been brought up with High Valyrian as their default language they're listening to. So it's, I mean, I'm not an expert enough in sort of creature psychology, let alone dragon psychology, but if a dragon has been brought up surrounded by people who only talk Valyrian, and then gets a dragon who is not talking Valyrian to them and is trying to teach them different sort of messages, commands, yeah, there might be a slight difference there. Tristan Chen saying, "Hello, Robert. What's your take on Fagon and Varys being Blackfires?" Yes, so it's not a House of Dragon question specifically, but I'll quickly answer this one here. My take is that Fagon definitely 90% certain Fagon is a Blackfire. As for Varys, I possibly. um, I did a video about Varys a while ago, sort of who is he, what does he want kind of video, and his background and history. We don't have any other way to verify it other than what he's already said. So it's entirely possible he claims to come from Lys. There are lots of people with Valyrian heritage in Lys. We know of at least one Targaryen, Aerion, who spent some time over there and we're told did have some bastard children. The fact that he has a bald head, the two other very notable bald-headed people that we've come across so far being Egg and now also Alyn Velaryon, have bald heads because they shave them to stop people seeing their Targaryen silver hair or Valyrian silver hair. So, yeah, absolutely. Pardon me. Sorry, absolutely possible that he is, but I don't think we've got any evidence to say definitely so. Martin S. In A Song of Ice and Fire, have they invented early optics technology such as simple telescopes? Yeah, they have mirrorish glass, which is basically a lens. And so we get, I think, Maester Lewin has one, and also a character called the Reader, who is based over in the Iron Islands, who does a lot of reading. He also basically has reading glasses. They're not called that, but that's basically what he uses. So they know simple optics, but it's not yet turned into something that is mass produced in any way. And Terra Incognita saying Kennel Master, but for dragons. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of in terms of the role of the dragon keepers. The nerd far away saying, "Hello, Robert. If I wanted to catch up on the Game of Thrones book series, where should I start? The last book I read was A Dance with Dragons, which is very frustrating, by the way. Well, if you want to do the book series, then the first place to start is A Game of Thrones book one, and then work your way up from that. Yeah, Dance with Dragons is book 5. If you've come straight into that, I've no idea what your history is here with this, but if you went straight into that without reading the first 4, then yes, you would have missed a lot of layers of nuance and understanding of what was going on. But yeah, try book 1. Lady Pushkins, thank you very much, and good night to you. For my peoples, They could use her not being there with little Aegon and Viserys on the way to Essos as a cause for Rhaenyra turning on her. This is Rhaena, I think we're talking about here. They could use Rhaena not being there with little Aegon and Viserys on the way to Essos as a cause for Rhaenyra turning on her, and then Daemon protecting her if indeed there's no Nettles. Yeah, they've set this up. I don't get me wrong when I say that I've not given up hope on Nettles. They've definitely set this up to work for Rhaena. The fact that we've got Daemon here on this kind of redemption arc of Kynes being challenged by effectively the ghost of his dead second wife. You've not been looking after our children. And the fact that we've got Rhaena, who almost certainly is not going to get on that boat going to Essos. Now, why is that a bit important? Because in the books, the Aegon spoilers for the potential spoilers for the show. Again, as I always say, this is what happens in the books. In the books, Aegon and Viserys get put on the Gay Abandon, the boat that we read or hear about on House of the Dragon, sent over to Essos. That gets attacked by the Triarchy. Aegon just about survives. Viserys gets captured. The attempt by Team Black to save them goes a little bit awry, and Jacaerys dies. It's all big and tragic. Now, they get sent off direct from Dragonstone in the book, but here Rhaena seems to be in charge of them, and it sounds like or looks like she's going to send off Aegon and Viserys on that boat, and she's going to stay in the Vale because she's seen there's a dragon there. Now, could Rhaenyra blame her? It would kind of make sense because she has basically entrusted her children to Rhaena to look after them, and if Rhaena abandoned them, then yeah. And then we also get Daemon, who is going to go spend time with her and look after her. And if Rhaenyra and Mysaria are an item in some way, shape, or form, Mysaria may well be wanting to turn Rhaenyra against Daemon. It all adds up. The way that they've set it up doesn't mean that Nettles is definitely not happening, but it kind of seems like the way that they've set it up suggests that not. Martin S. Are the Maesters, or some of them, like Westeros's version of scientists and engineers, or are they just medical doctors and historians? Yes, it's the answer. So they are based down in Old Town, which is this ancient city which has the citadel, which is the heart of where the Maesters are, and they get trained or have potential to get trained in all of knowledge, history, economics, warfare, engineering, whatever it is. They can get trained in all of these different things. Now, as it happens, the Maesters then they get sent out to be the counselors and teachers of the 1%. Not many of them seem to then go out as scientists and engineers and inventors. That doesn't seem to be a thing which happens huge amounts. There's a lot of scribes and things like that who emerge from Old Town, but not many people are going off and like inventing things. Now, I think George R. R. Martin has said that the best possible idea is kind of like medieval Western European monks is probably the best or closest idea. They're the people who know how to read and write. They're the people who they've got access to books and literacy and understanding. And that doesn't mean that they're there heading off being engineers or anything like that. They might do, but that's not really. They're about learning for learning's sake. Apocalypse Agon. Why is Mysaria spreading the discontent? Why is Mysaria spreading the discontent working as well as it should? do you think Maylis killing people in the Dragon Pit would have had them cheering on the fact that Aegon? You'd think that Maylis killing people in the Dragon Pit would have had them cheering on the fact that Aegon avenged them. Okay, so Melis, the dragon, when Rhaenys came out in the Dragon Pit through the floor, they didn't focus on this at all, but undoubtedly people died. Small folk who they hadn't intended to be there, they got rounded up, they got pushed into the Dragon Pit to witness this crowning, the coronation of Aegon, and then Melis comes up through the floor. Lots of small folk would have died. Now, would they therefore be pleased that Melis had been killed? Not that the reaction is actually, I think, giving the small folk a lot more credit. This is the reaction both in the books and also on the TV show, which is an understanding of the political situation, in as much as two things. Firstly, wow, they've just killed that dragon and Rhaenys, and she was on Team Black. How is Rhaenyra going to respond? We're not going to be safe here because Rhaenyra is going to come here now. So that's the first thing, and that I think is a perfectly rational and sensible response to Melis going through. Would they? I mean, in the behind the scenes thing, Ryan Condal sort of says that Melis was a much loved dragon, which had been seen flying over for a while. Yeah, perhaps you're right that would have been tarnished a bit by what happened recently. But basically, people saw it as a bad omen. And so the second important point is that people suddenly saw dragons can be killed because they hadn't seen that before. If the last time really a big dragon head was dragged through King's Landing was during the invasion, when Aegon decided that he wanted to be taking out Dawn, and then it was Rhaenys' dragon again, his sister wife Rhaenys with her dragon Meraxes. Meraxes' head was brought through the streets of King's Landing. But this is 100 years beforehand, so nobody alive in King's Landing had seen a dragon killed like that, a dragon head there just paraded through King's Landing. And that meant that they thought, okay, they are not gods. You can kill dragons. And that was an important kind of psychological breakthrough. Ghost Dreamer saying, I wonder if Messalina or Deanna will become one of those propping up Gaiman Palehair later. Messalina is Team Smallfolk, which won't always be Team Rhaenyra. Well, yeah, so high level, what happens is, again, spoilers. I shouldn't, at some point, I'll stop saying this. There are spoilers in the books. Rhaenyra takes King's Landing. It does not go well. The people basically hound her out of the city. And Messalina, for reasons it's not clear really in the books, decides to stay behind. Now, I like this idea that she has stayed behind because she cares about King's Landing and she cares about the small folk. But in the book, she kind of gets captured and suffers quite a horrible fate and gets killed by the small folk. So the people who Gaiman Palehair, and very probably actually is going to be if do you remember back in season 1 when you get the Cargill twins going down into Flea Bottom looking for Aegon, and they see a child just sort of sitting in a corner with very Targaryen blonde hair, and it's like, yeah, that's clearly one of his bastard children. And one of those in the book, one of those is raised up by the small folk, in particular the sex workers, who say this is now our king, and there's anarchy going on around all through King's Landing. And if they get that far, and I think they probably will, if they get that far, then they will need to have some characters who do this. And Deanna, and also I can't remember her name, the woman who was Aemon's lover. Those two seem the most obvious candidates for that. Martin S. It appears as if the Maesters are a bit like Aes Sedai, particularly the Brown Aja in the Wheel of Time, minus the magic. Yeah, I think I'd probably say yeah. That kind of makes sense. Um, without the magic and anti magic, but potentially having um, a kind of a corporate agenda that not everyone knows, but they are also out there in the courts of the wise and the mighty of the land. So yeah, that kind of works. And Maura Lee, hi there, Maura. Great to see you, and thank you. Very generous of you as well. Saying just a show of love and support. Been loving the stories and the well-told tale. Hugs to Dan the dog. Dan the dog is still back there. I think he's fast asleep. So he's not gone up. I imagine if he does wake up, he will just go straight up to bed. But he's just sort of collapsed there on a cushion at the moment. Okay. We've got a question from Had saying, hi Robert, on a scale from Alex to Vagar, how large is Sheep Stealer? Okay, interesting question. So George R. R. Martin doesn't like detail on these kinds of things. It's probably fair to say. So occasionally you will get kind of clues, but he's not given us a list of dimensions of any of his dragons. Now, what do we know about Sheep Stealer? Sheep Stealer was born, we're told, when King Charis was young. Now, that means that Sheep Stealer is probably at this point 100-ish years old. So quite a good mature dragon. So all of the ones that's pretty much the younger characters have got, they're small dragons, they're new dragons. So the Jace and Lucerys and Baylor, these are young dragons. Sheepstealer is way bigger than them. Sheepstealer is smaller than Vagar, who we know is the biggest dragon around at the moment. Vermithor is the second biggest dragon. Then it gets a little bit confusing. So we've got Cannibal, who we don't have a big physical description of, but is probably very old and probably very large, but we don't know. Then you get this handful of next ones like Silverwing, like Caraxes, like Dreamfire, that have been around. They're decades old now, but they're not as big as the massive dragons, but they're clearly much bigger than those teeny tiny dragons. This is the band that we put Sheep Stealer in. I think the implication is the Sheep Stealer is probably near the top end of that band as one of the older dragons. We are told that Sheep Stealer is, and I can't remember the exact word, thin, I think was the word. But we're beyond that, we're not told. So I think the if you guessed that Sheep Stealer's like the fifth or sixth biggest out of 20 that we had to start the war, then that's probably about right. Zach K saying, just wanted to say thank you for hours of great content. I have endlessly binged and for many live streams with great people. Well, thank you. I hugely appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And reflective rambling saying, Dan, I missed a cameo. You did not miss a cameo. So I don't want this to be all about Dan the dog. Dan the dog. The only update is that normally by this point he's taken himself upstairs. This time he has not. I think it's because I took a day out yesterday and I put him into doggy daycare, and I think he's I don't know whether he was missing me a little bit, but he seems to be happy being with me this evening. So he's fast asleep behind the green screen, and maybe at some point he will decide that he wants to go up to bed. But normally he's up to bed and gone, but this time he's decided to stay down. That's the only down update. Maura Lee saying mod love to my fellow mods. Yeah, absolutely. Another chance to say a bit of give a bit of love to the moderators because they are fantastic. The Bimpy Spingle saying, I think you did a video on it about what's my current position on the oily black stone, and are the origins of it all the same? Yeah, I did do a video. I'm going to redo that one, but very broadly speaking, when you're reading A Song of Ice and Fire, you'll find Blackstone mentioned quite a few times. There are, let's see if I can remember my video, 4 different types of blackstone that we read about. You get one which is very clearly basalt equivalent, which is just black stone. You get one which is a fused blackstone, but doesn't seem to be particularly magical. It's just fused in, so big blocks of fused blackstone. This seems to be the kind of things that you get at the base of the High Tower, the 5 forts. Then you get the kind of the Targaryen twiddly blackstone, the stuff that you get at Dragonstone, the Wall of Valantis, that kind of thing. And then fourthly, you get oily blackstone, of which we only have, I think, probably 4 different examples. Now, what's my take on that? That is the one which seems to be deliberately put in there by George R. R. Martin to be anachronistic, feel a bit weird. So I will redo that one, and so keep an eye out for that video for sort of a more developed set of thinking on that. I think I got another question, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I've caught up. Martin S. saying about this is Lord of the Rings question, about the elven tribes of Valinor. The relationship between the Noldor and the Teleri was largely destroyed by the first kinslaying. However, what was the Vanya Teleri and Vanya Noldor relationship like? Fine, I think is the short answer. So for those who don't know, not all elves are the same in Tolkien's world. There are lots of different types of elves, and here, and he breaks it down in lots of different ways. But here we've got the Vanya, who are basically the elves who, way back in the mist of time, followed what the Valar said, and they went over to the Undying Lands, and they settled themselves around the big mountain Tanaquetil there, and they seem the best and the holiest, for want of a better word, of them. The Teleri, they did follow this, but only made it kind of so far, and the ones that we're talking about here, they kind of decided they didn't want to actually go all the way, so they just stayed on an island just off the coast of the Undying Lands, Aman, basically. And then we get the Noldor. The Noldor, we know this is where Galadriel and Celebrimbor and like are from, and they're the most interesting, active of these different groups. Now. What's the relationship between the Noldor and the Vanya? Well, the Vanya probably viewed the Noldor as being a little bit disruptive, but yeah, they got on. And then the Vanya and the Teleri, well, there was quite a big distance between them, but we don't hear of any bad blood between them. And agree, Woodward, thank you very much for putting the link in there to the types of elves video that I did. There are so many types of elves in Tolkien's world, but yeah, if you want to break down, I did a video on it. But we're talking mostly at the moment about still episode 6 of House of the Dragon season 2. Alhad. After the dance, Silverwing makes its lair somewhere in the Reach, if I recall correctly. Given the last not a blog post, can we see her coming back to Dragonstone in Fire and Blood Part 2? So this is George R. R. Martin, who did a big blog post the week before. I've mentioned this a couple of times already, but a few days before episode 6, where it was all about dragon lore. And he went through a whole load of different things, and he ended up talking about whether dragons kind of flew away from their home much, and he came out with a firm no. He said maybe in exceptional circumstances, but as a whole, they stuck to where they were. They liked where they were. They got a lair. They hunted around their area, and that was pretty much it. They would only move to another place, generally speaking, if they got ridden there. So, in the light of that, might we expect to see Silverwing return to Dragonstone? Because we know that they like Dragonstone. Silverwing, during the Dance of the Dragon, Silverwing gets claimed, goes to Tumbleton, and the other dragons all die, kill each other, basically. And Silverwing survives and seems to be in mourning for Vermithor, which is a callback to their first riders. Silverwing was Queen Alison's dragon. Vermithor was King Jaehaerys's dragon, and they were a couple who were together for a very long time. So when Vermithor dies, it seems only natural that Silverwing might mourn in some way. Silverwing flew off after that and ended up in the Reach. They were already in the Reach. Tumbleton is in the Reach, and ends up on an island in the middle of Red Lake in the Reach. Now, this is some distance away, but as far as we can tell, then the Silverwing stays there. So I don't think we interpret, or we should interpret, what George R. R. Martin is saying that all dragons will immediately try and return home. Maybe they will. Certainly, we have the Balerion thing, where when Balerion was very old, seemed to fly off over to Valyria, and that perhaps a lot of people have interpreted that as a kind of an instinct, just flying home, because Balerion was born in Valyria, so that's kind of an instinct thing. Really, old dragon near death wants to just return home. Might we see that in Silverwing? Well, possibly. But the other thing that George R. R. Martin was emphasizing is that once they've got their lair, once they've found their place, if they're happy with it, then they don't leave. So instinctively, I would say no, Silverwing's just going to stay there and will probably just die there. Let's go to Andrew K saying Silverwing trying to nudge Vermithor back to life, back up after he's fallen, will be heartbreaking on screen. Yeah, absolutely. They've not really given us Vermithor and Silverwing. I assume that's the last couple of episodes of this season, but they're as dragons, they're kind of legendary. Jaehaerys and Alison's dragons, these two, and they kind of come together as much as anything else. So yeah, I hope that they introduce them together so that we can, from the start, we can see that they are a pair almost. Rassler saying, "Good day, Robert. I hope you and Dan the dog are well. We are, thank you. I hope, although it's not in the book, I really loved the idea of Sea Smoke seeking out and choosing Adam, and kind of hope it was a George-approved idea. We don't have anything to say that this was approved by George R. R. Martin. Indeed, I do kind of wonder whether this may also be partly. I mean, the interpretation of the blog post is that he was getting his response in early because he couldn't really be seen to an episode comes out and then he does a blog post complaining about the episode. He's almost certainly got in his contract something to say that he shouldn't be bad mouthing the series because that just protects HBO's back. Of course, they don't want George. If George R. R. Martin turned around and said, "Well, this is terrible," then that will be terrible for HBO. So I'm pretty sure that he's got something. He can't say anything bad about it, but at the same time, he can clarify some bits about his own law. And if he does that before the episode airs, then he's kind of got away with it. So I think that seems to be the implication of what we got going on here. Most people have thought that this is talking about Sheep Stealer, who we're told ranged far from Dragonstone, and George R. Martin is like, no, 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 they wouldn't range far from Dragonstone. But we also get Sea Smoke, who seems to have happily had a nest there at King's Landing, and then after deciding that Stefan Darkland wasn't going to be the new rider, then went off elsewhere. The kind of implication from what George R. R. Martin says is that that wouldn't happen either. Now, whether it would go and hunt down Adam Velaryon, we don't know. We haven't got anything from George R. R. Martin on that. But the idea that the dragon might then just sort of like fly off somewhere doesn't seem to be what is the kind of the feel of what George R. R. Martin was saying. Question from a reflective rambling, picking up for Gentle Ben 86. Thank you. I love it when people pick up questions for other people. Could the man who loses his hand after grabbing Alicent end up being the shepherd, his injury causing him to be very anti-Targaryen? I mean, I've seen this theory. I really like this theory. So, in what will probably be season 3, the discontent of the small folk is going to become focused in on a rabble-rousing preacher, a guy called the Shepherd from the Faith of the Seven, and he is going to be directing people's hate against the Targaryens, against the dragons, on a kind of Faith of the Seven basis. You know, they're heretics and all the rest of it, but also the dragons they're bad and evil and wrong. So that first of all preaching to a few people in the square, and then this becomes a few hundred, and then thousands, and then tens of thousands, and then eventually he kind of leads this mass revolt heading up to the dragon pit to just try and take on the dragons. Now, we don't know anything. Fire and Blood doesn't tell us anything. They don't know anything in world about who this person was, but we're told he only had one hand. Now, I love this idea that maybe the person whose hand was cut off during that riot, the person who tried to get to Alicent, that person may turn into the shepherd. I don't know. I suspect that they will probably do quite an intensive casting to get the right person for the shepherd, because this has to be somebody who is believably a leader of people, somebody who could persuade people to charge at a massive building full of dragons, and that will take some. So I've no idea who the actor was who had their hand chopped off, but it could well be. Even if they make the link, what I'm saying is, even if they make the link across to there, then it could well be that they recast. Game of Thrones, let's not forget, recast so many times. The Mountain was recast, Bloodraven was recast. So many times they recast characters that they'd had somebody come in and do like the standard job to start with, and then they decided, you know what, actually we need somebody who can be delivering something different or more, or we don't like that look or whatever. So don't expect that if that is the character that they're going to turn into the shepherd, that the actor is going to be the same. Larys read it before, saying the theory that Sheepstealer and Nettles retreat to the Vale Mountains after the dance is well known. George R. R. Martin just sank that theory too in his Not a Blog ? Okay, so this is it's an interesting one. So what I don't think the short answer is no, but I'll get to why that is that what he said is that dragons don't range far on their own. Left to their own devices, they will stay where they are, they'll make their nest, find a lair, whatever it is, and then they're not going to range far from there. They will fly pretty much anywhere if somebody flies them to that place. So this does not preclude in any way the idea of what happened in the books, which is that after Damon flew off to confront Aemond, we have Nettles on Sheepstealer going to the Vale of Arran and basically just settling down in the mountains. Now, so from what he said in his Not a Blog, yeah, that's fine, because if Sheepstealer is flown there by Rhaena, as it might be therefore in the show, that's just how it is. But the bigger thing for me would be, if they go down this route with Rhaena, is why on earth do that afterwards? Once Rhaenyra's gone, once the threat has disappeared, why not go back and see your sister, who's living a very happy life? Why would you go off and just live a loner life in the Vale? If you get, and this might work, if we have the way that this could work, if we're hoping, fingers crossed, that Nettles does appear, then it is because Nettles is in the Vale already. And so flying back to the Vale actually makes some sense for that Nettles character. So yeah, George R. Martin doesn't preclude it. I don't think this impacts on it whatsoever. But there's some potential here for this to make a little bit more sense, unless they're going with the Rhaena thing, which makes less sense. Let's go to a question from Rassler. Linked to this, is the show setting up Rhaenyra Mysaria relationship to set up why or how she will turn Rhaenyra against Daemon? Well, again, this kind of makes sense. We don't know how they're going to go with this, but it kind of makes sense that if you get Daemon, who's turned back, he's gone through his character journey, and turned back towards Rhaenyra, if she's cold towards him because she's moved on, which, to be fair, he abandoned her, didn't say where he was going, how long he'd be, anything. So if she's moved on and then he realizes that and then heads off to try and be a good dad or whatever it was, then yes, you could say that Rhaenyra still would need some kind of a nudge, and the nudge could be Mysaria, who is going to become one of her closest in the book, not just in the show, one of her closest advisors. If she says, hey, you know what, that Daemon's going to turn against you, then that kind of makes up for it. And it would kind of explain why Mysaria might do that, because it was always a little bit uncertain why Mysaria might do that in the book, because it's like, the way you set this up was that she was Daemon's lover, and now she seems to be trying to turn Rhaenyra against her. this twist does kind of answer that. Andrew Kay saying that Christopher Eccleston would be his dream to play the Shepherd. Has that range and power and has done work with HBO. I agree. I'd not even thought about casting for the Shepherd, but I think Christopher Eccleston would indeed be almost perfect in my mind. I'd love it. Yeah, that would work really well. He's got that kind of, from a British perspective, that kind of working class, passionate vibe going on. Yeah, I'd like that a lot. Feel free to drop in the chat other people you think might be good as the Shepherd. Let's go to Mr. Worldwide saying, "Good morrow, Robert. First off, I loved Adam's final scene with Sea Smoke. I'm curious to see how they handle Sea Smoke claiming a new rider next episode. I kind of doubt we'll get any resolution relating to Laenor, but if we do, what do you expect it'll be? My personal headcanon is he joined the Second Sons and was murdered by an officer for defending a woman's honor from said officer. In this scenario, maybe we get a page torn out of the Second Sons logbook that details the history of all their members." So yeah. So we had this law issue about Sea Smoke, which I mean I've talked about many times. In the book, then Laenor's dead. Definitely, Laenor is dead, and so somebody becoming a new rider for Sea Smoke isn't an issue. As far as we're aware, dragons can only ever have one rider at a time. But on the show, Laenor, as far as we're aware, is still alive. So what's going on there? Now, I get all of these arguments about are they going to tell us this? Are they going to tell? They might do. They may well tell us lots of things. But my instinct is to go, actually, Rhaenyra didn't think it was an issue. Forget all of the other stuff. Rhaenyra was there back in at the end of episode 5 when Jace was initially talking about this. He was saying, well, we've got Vermithor and Silverwing. We can see whether we can find anyone for them. And then Rhaenyra turns around and it's like, oh, we got Sea Smoke. Let's do Sea Smoke. See whether Sea Smoke wants to have a new rider. And you have to assume, based on that she didn't think this was an issue. Because as far as we're aware, she thinks that Laenor is still alive. So I think perhaps in TV show world, we don't know what the situation is in the books, in TV show world, then actually you can have, if you abandon your dragon, then your dragon can bond with someone new. And it kind of makes sense in that kind of weird position that the dragon would want to go to somebody who felt like their previous rider, smelt like them, whatever it is. Just getting a few questions. Currently the Clay saying too many doctors in one show. I mean, can you have too many doctors in one show? I don't know. But then obviously people are suggesting David Tennant and Peter Capaldi. I think Peter Capaldi would be able to pull it off better than David Tennant. Huge admiration for David Tennant, but he's not how I envisage the Shepherd. Joel Thompson suggesting John Pertwee. It may be a little too late for that one. Let's go to, and Commander Ray suggesting Cillian Murphy. Yeah, I mean, Dreamcast, I would absolutely agree with you. I suspect he's now too expensive. He's had quite a good year. Martin S is saying, yes, Christopher Eccleston is a great actor. Besides, if he got into House of the Dragon, they could have Doctor Who 9 and 11. Yeah, they could, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think Christopher Eccleston would be great. For those who don't know Doctor Who, he's done many other fantastic things, Christopher Eccleston, but he was the Ninth Doctor, he was the one when they brought it back in the early 2000s. He was the actor who was only there for a season for various reasons, and then David Tennant took over, but he did a fantastic job. Let's go to a question from Rassler saying, I enjoyed the scene between Alicent and Gawain. getting to see them interact and share a moment was nice. It was very somber and gave off final goodbye vibes. It appears they've changed Gawain's death from the books, and I would actually like to see him live through based on the scene, but I'd say the chances are almost zero. Yeah. So in the book, Gawain comes to King's Landing at the same time as Otto and Alicent. And he's there for nearly 30 years, to be honest. So this whole just him arriving during the Civil War, that's not the case. In the book, he's been there for a long time. Otto makes him second in command of the Gold Cloaks because he doesn't trust the guy who's in charge. And Gawain is there when King's Landing falls, and he gets killed. So that's basically, I mean, there's more to it than that, you understand, but that's basically where we end up with it. So they've gone a slightly different route, obviously, with him arriving a little bit later. They've used him for a few different things here, so he's not really had his own character arc here. They've used him to as a foil to show what Kristen Cole's up to. What he's thinking is that he's the person who can say that, but Kristen Cole, why on earth are we attacking during daylight? This is craziness, that kind of thing. And then Kristen Cole can react to that. So they've used him for that. They've also used him as and here's an update on what's going on in Old Town, because you're kind of wondering what's going on in Old Town. So they basically used him to be showing other stuff. I suspect that will continue because he's the other person going with Kristen Cole, other than so for the next couple of episodes, we're going to have the army sort of riding up towards Harrenhal, and then who does Kristen Cole talk to? There's just rando other people. No, we've got a character for him to talk to now. So I imagine that that's going to continue. What they do with him after that, he's a sufficiently small character that you could imagine that they could keep him in, to be honest. So as in not kill him, and it wouldn't change the course of anything. The important thing is, I mean, I sort of kind of nerdily noticed the episode. There were so many things that happened in this episode. Seriously, so many things to talk about. Aemond kind of emptied out the Green Council. He sent Tywin Lannister away. He sent Alicent away. He sent Kristen Cole away. So he's like emptying out who's there. He's going to depart at some point. And what we're left with are the people, the members of the Green Council who were there in the books when King's Landing fell. So that's I think that they probably now think they've got enough people there that we can see this through. That we've got Alicent, we've got Aegon, who's still clinging to life. We've got Helena, we've got Ironrod, we've got Larys, Allwyle. We've got a lot of people still in King's Landing, so we don't need to have Freddie Fox there. We don't need to have Gwen Hightower there. We can let him go off and do the being the foil for Kristen Cole. So yeah, I think there's a better chance of him surviving this than I would have thought when I knew that they were going to bring in this character. Question from the Lady Eternal. Good time zone, Robert. When it comes to the shepherd, 2 words: Brian Blessed. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, he's getting on a bit, but could you imagine that big booming voice leading the attack on the dragon pit? Yeah, that would work well. I love it. Great idea. So probably 2 or 3 decades too late, but love the idea. Gina Z saying, "Hi Robert, thank you for the live stream. I really liked the scene between Alicent and Aemond when he dismisses her from the council. On the House of the Dragon podcast, Aemond actor Ewan Mitchell described Alicent as Aemond's kryptonite. What do you think of this interpretation?" And then Raven's Oath saying, "Less of a question and more of a desire to share how I view Aemond and Alicent. Though the show is strongly illustrating Aemon's mummy issues, we still see he's in control and deliberate with his actions to Alicent. Last season, we saw how he reassured her that he's okay, losing an eye for Vhagar, clearly trying to comfort her. Then he held her arms and assured her that he would find Aegon when he was hiding. You can see the foundation of his love. While she views him as a monster or maybe just a loose cannon, I believe he sees her hypocrisy and weakness for Rhaenyra and the Blacks. She has a love for our enemies. What's going on? What's this Alicent and Aemond thing? The Aemond's kryptonite. Well, I hadn't come across that podcast from what was said, but. I understand it, and I think there's two things here. Is that Aemond, as far as the characters go, and understand, he is quite inscrutable. As far as most of the people there on the show are concerned, they can't really see what's going on with him. They can't get underneath the shell. She can. And when they have that scene, when he was dismissing her, and she comes up to him and she just like cradles his face and says, something along the lines of, "When are you going to be able to let go of the indignities of your past?" Which is basically saying, "I know why you're doing all this. It's because they teased you, they hurt you when you were younger," and that I think is why he calls her Aemon's kryptonite, because she understands in a way that no one else understands quite what the psychology is that's going on in there. So I think that's point one. Point two, this mummy issues thing, they are definitely setting up the fact that he likes older women, the fact that he feels the need to get close to women, an older woman, and kind of confess, to kind of unbear his soul. And Freud, I'm sure, would give us, he would have a field day on this one. But there are all kinds of things there, and that comes back to his relationship with his mother. Wanda Ray, Alice and Damon's magical therapy has got me thinking about the defiance of Duskendale. And whether or not perhaps the common folk were sort of right about Lord Dennis Darklin's wife. What if Lady Sarala was magically inclined and drove Aerys mad, but not on purpose, and accidentally perhaps trying to make him understand the coming threat, or even triggering dragon dreams that led to madness and fire? After all, Aerys, out of all of the Darklings, burned only her. Your thoughts? Okay, so those who don't know the defiance at Duskendale, this happens a bit before Robert's Rebellion. So a bit before the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. King Aerys II, the Mad King, as we know him, he gets embroiled in it's a small dispute. Duskendale is a port town just up the coast from King's Landing. It had issues that King's Landing is a new-ish city by Westerosi standards. There was nothing there at all 300 years ago. Duskendale was the biggest port in the area. Then King's Landing arrives, grows, and suddenly everything's coming into King's Landing. And Duskendale kind of felt aggrieved. They'd lost a lot of trade. This had affected them. And so Lord Darklin there basically said, I want to have preferential rates. A bit more complicated than this, but I want preferential rates. And just argued and argued and argued, and Aerys eventually went in person to try and deal with this problem. But Aerys, the king, was kidnapped by Lord Darklin. This is a shock move. What's this random mid-ranking noble just kidnapped the king? And he I think it was 6 months he was there, and basically said, if you try and attack, then we'll kill the king. And so the king's Tywin Lannister at the time, Hand of the King, had the army ready, but decided not to go for it because the king would get killed if they tried to attack. Eventually decided, you know what, this can't carry on forever. We do have to go for it. We'll call their bluff. And there's this moment, Barristan Selmy, legend that he is, says, okay, I understand you have to go in there. I, as a King's Guard, I'm honor bound to try and save my king. And so the night before you actually go in, I'm going to try one man, break into the castle, get down to the dungeons, rescue him. And it's like, okay, if that's what you want to do, you go and do that. And he succeeds. This is the legend of Barristan Selmy. He sneaks in to a city. He sneaks into the castle. He makes his way down to the dungeon. He gets the king. He brings him out. He smuggles him out of the castle. He smuggles him out of the city. One man there, just him and his sword, astonishing. And it's almost like you can imagine Tywin Lannister's like, huh? How that wasn't part of the plan? How did you do that? So anyway, during this period, Aerys, who'd already been a little bit paranoid, got way worse when he emerged, and he wipes House Darklin off the map, basically. And we're told, looking back, that everyone says that actually this wasn't Lord Darklin's doing. It was his mysterious foreign wife, who perhaps she was a sorceress. She had an unfair influence on him. So is this, or could this possibly be something like what we see on the show with Alice Rivers in Harrenhal, where she's clearly trying to nudge Daemon through dreams and visions to go in a certain direction? Could that have been happening, that she was trying to do this with Aerys, and it's just that he was captured and he couldn't escape and his brain wasn't strong enough, and unlike Daemon, who tries to get out, he had no chance of getting out? Could this be what happened there? Maybe. I don't think we've got any evidence for it, but I get it. It could work. Paul El Gaib saying, hello, Robert. I want to ask you about dragon bonding, using the example of a video game. There's a mod for Crusader Kings 2, which I've never played, but I've seen. A mod where the player can lead a dynasty in the Game of Thrones universe. One manages the armies, castles, and members of the house. In the game, every person from the Wall to Asshai has something like a 0.2% chance to successfully tame a dragon and become a rider. The other 99.8% getting burned. But there are modifiers that can increase the chance, the most important being a character's culture. The High Valyrian culture gives a 3,000% increase. There are also minor Valyrian cultures like Asozi Valyrian in Volantis' nobility, or Westerosi Valyrian for like Baratheons. And the character's personality traits can have some minor effects too, like being brave or a genius, or maybe worshipping R'hllor, the gods of old Valyria. So what's your take? Okay, so my take is, I mean, I don't know when that mod and game came out. My take is, I think it's a good game from what I've heard and understand. I think it's a good mod from what I've heard and understand. The dragon bonding thing is their best guess at how this works. And they tried to code this in some way. What we've seen, I did a Dragonseeds video quite recently, actually, and basically what becomes apparent is that there's no 100%. I think they've probably got this right. There's no 100% here, as far as we can tell. You can put an egg in a child's basket or cradle as they're young and growing up, and there's no guarantee that egg will hatch and they will be able to bond. There's no guarantee that if you've got Valyrian heritage, then they'll be able to bond with the dragon. There's this extra layer in terms of how you approach the dragon. Clearly, the way that Nettles did it by bringing sheep, that seemed to work, but then other people seem to have just walked towards the dragon and climbed on board. So it's not a simple algorithm. What I'd say here is it's not a simple algorithm. It's not you just have to add up all of your plus points, and if you get there, then you get an X% chance of being right. But there is that kind of feel to it. It has to be said. If you are of Targaryen, ancestry very strong, if you approach the dragon in the right way, if the dragon has been previously ridden, this seems to be another thing, is that previously ridden dragons seem more amenable to having a new rider than completely or older dragons that have never had a rider. So there's an element here of the dragon side as well as what human side is. So I would say this is more complicated than that. I can understand why in that kind of game they need to have some kind of set of criteria. But George R. R. Martin, although he's kind of hinted, he said Septon Bath got a lot of this right, and we'll find out more in Winds of Winter, A Dream of Spring, and Blood and Fire, which is Fire and Blood Part 2, as and when we get them. So in his mind, there are some more elements to this that he has not yet told us. But it's clear it's not as straightforward as just, if you've got this and this and this, then you will succeed. Rassler saying it's always been assumed that Adam was able to claim a dragon because House Velaryon have married into the Targaryen bloodline throughout history. But could it also be possible that their ability to ride dragons could come from having married a member of another Dragon Lord house from the Valyrian freehold at some point before the Doom? Yes. Yes, we don't have a full family tree for House Velaryon. I mean, we do have around the bit of the dance, but before that, we don't have a full family tree. There's also the fact that we're all talking about Adam and Alan having Targaryen blood through their father. What about their mother, who in the books is called Mouse, and we don't know huge amounts about her? But what if she's a dragon seed? What if one of her father was a Targaryen? Who knows? Maybe. So there are lots of different extra layers in there. Could the Valyrians have intermarried before the Doom with other Valyrian families? A Valyrian dragon riding family? Yeah, I see absolutely no reason why not. The connection between the Targaryens and Valyrians may well have existed before this, but there's nothing that we see that says that they were as close as they are now back before the Doom. The Valyrians they moved across first, and they always were this kind of seafaring family. And so the Valyrians knew that they had, I'm not going to go all the way down that rabbit hole, but they had various prophecies that made them not want to actually go into Westeros, but they knew that controlling the narrow sea and the seaways between Westeros and Essos was strategically very important. So they found a few islands, and they basically bought the island for House Velaryon, and House Velaryon there patrolling the sea. The Targaryens came a bit later to another island there, Dragonstone, which had been built before then. So there's no hint that necessarily the Velaryons and the Targaryens before then were that close, but afterwards they were obviously very close. They were the two most senior houses that survived the Doom. Fatherhood and fitness. Do you interpret any significance in the dragon skull's eyes seeming to follow various characters as they walked in the throne room in the first Song of Ice and Fire book? So, well, if you're talking about the skulls, the dragon skulls that we see a couple of times in the first book with Arya and also with Tyrion. Now, they used to be in the throne room, but then they got taken down in sort of below ground in the Red Keep. Now, is there any sort of significance to them? I think that the answer has to be yes, because it's made so clear in the way that it's written. When Arya is down there, the language is so against her. The shadows seem to be out to try and bite her. She can see how sharp they are. It seems like the whole thing is just against her, in the same way that when somebody who shouldn't be down in the crypts of Winterfell, the statues there seem to be like casting judgmental glances. That's the same feel. Arya is not in her place there. The contrast is Tyrion, who remembers going there and finding them strangely beautiful. And this is, I think we have to say, and I mean, I've talked about this so many times and I've swayed in various directions, we have to say that the first 2 or 3 chapters of Tyrion are written in such a way as to heavily hint that there is a Targaryen link there for him. He talks about being obsessed with dragons. He talks about staring into the flames for hours, imagining dragons. He dreams of dragons. And here he goes, he sees the dragon skulls and they just seem friendly and at home compared to with Arya. So that's the thing that we get set up there. Whether that's an abandoned plot point from George R. R. Martin, whether it's just to try and show us the Starks are not, this isn't their place, which is true, then I don't know. But it is a deliberate showing of a juxtaposition of these two different reactions. Courtney L. Conover saying Aerion Targaryen married Velena Velaryon, Aegon Visenya, and Rhaenys' parents. This is going back to so the Aegon Visenya and Rhaenys. This is Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives. And so we get a connection between the Velaryons and the Targaryens, and we're told that they have done over the generations. They intermarried a lot, so that's definitely there. The issue some people have pointed out is that doesn't inject Targaryen DNA into the Velaryons. If a female Velaryon marries into the Targaryen line, you need it going the other way around. You need somebody marrying into the Velaryons. That probably did happen, and there probably is somebody. But if you're just relying on that, then you're looking at something that is the same kind of distance as Stefan Darklin's rather vague claim, grandmother's grandmother. The grandmother's grandmother, as I said earlier on in the stream, if you take him very roughly in show canon, in book canon, he's older than this, but in show canon, he looks roughly the same generation as Viserys and Daemon. If you take the great grandparents of them, then you get to Aegon the Conqueror. So that's looking at the same kind of level of attachment. So I tend to go with the idea that they are Valyrian. They might not be dragon riding stock, but they are Valyrian. They have got some Targaryens probably married into them at some point, and there is the possibility that Mouse, the mother of Alan and Adam, might also be. There's no evidence of this. This is just pure speculation. Maybe she also is a dragon seed. Okay, let's go to question from Keith Boynton. Not sure if this has been mentioned already, but when Larys reveals that his father blamed Larys's deformity on a member of the family whom he suspected of witchcraft, that sounds like an awful lot like Alice, doesn't it? And if so, what are the implications? Yeah, it did definitely, and you're not the only person to think this. So, what Larys was saying when he's doing his little heart-to-heart with Aegon, and he's saying basically, I was born with this disability, and people have always underestimated me, and now that's a thing that you're going to have to get used to. But he also drops in this idea that when he was born, his father thought that maybe he'd been cursed by a sorceress who's there. Yeah, in the book, this is made even clearer. They say that she looked at about 40, but it seems that she was much older than that. So already they're kind of setting that up. Basically, they have to, in some way, if they wish to show that element of who she is, they have to somehow do that. They've also, in doing so, set up the idea that not all of House Strong are in on with Alice Rivers. Simon Strong seems to be okay with her, at least tolerating her. But Lionel Strong didn't seem to. Harwin, we don't hear about. Larys is the one that's really intriguing. Is that where does he land on this? He certainly seems to be aware of a lot of the kind of the magical stuff around her, but it's not 100% clear. One other thing that they're possibly trying to get to is, and a lot of people, Joe Magician has done lots of videos about the potential for Larys to be a green seer. But they have definitely set up this idea of green seers potentially as human green seers. They're sort of disabled in some way. We get Bloodraven, who only has one eye. We get Bran, who can't walk. And what do we have here with, let's say, Larys? Larys, he can't walk easily. What do we get with Aemond, who's going to be up in Harrenhal at some point? Well, he's only got one eye. The echoes of this are resounding across time. That's not me saying that either of those characters are necessarily Greenseers, but they're giving us echoes of the characters we know are Greenseers, and the link across to them is Alice. Was Fox in Arda saying the law pickle of Sheepstealer in the Vale, which is the how on earth could, if George R. R. Martin says that dragons don't migrate, they don't range far, how does that fit in with what we've just seen on the TV show where we get a dragon who ranged far? The law pickle of Sheepstealer in the Vale could be sorted without going against George's world building if perhaps Vhagar laid eggs in the Vale while there with Visenya, or an egg somehow ended up there. Dragons in this world don't seem to rely on older dragons to raise them. Do you think there's a workaround that doesn't dismiss George's law for Sheepstealer? So, I mean, without sort of going over all of the things I've already said, I think that you could have a kind of a workaround that you say George R. R. Martin was clear that they don't go to unless unless it's exceptional circumstances. What might constitute exceptional circumstances? The complete lack of sheep on Dragonstone. might be one. You then have to ask how the other dragon's surviving. But if they're surviving by imported sheep, just assuming dragons just eat sheep, nothing else. But if they are surviving on imported sheep, and the sheep around the area, the still wild, untamed dragons like Sheepsteal have just run out of food, and they don't want to be settling themselves down in with the other dragons who've previously had riders. They've got own lair somewhere else on the island. It would perhaps be exceptional circumstances to go, okay, we'll fly off somewhere else and find food somewhere else. So I think the exceptional circumstances is the weird workaround. Vagar laying eggs in the Vale. You could use that as a workaround, but you then have to get into the whole idea of, so the Vale have eggs there. So Visenya was with Vagar all the time, and Visenya would have noticed if there were some eggs there, and so probably would have gone and claimed them because they wished to retain the monopoly on dragons, understandably Targaryens. So this has to be something which was done without Visenya knowing. And then you have to assume that the dragon eggs stayed, either they stayed for a long time before hatching in non-optimal conditions, or they hatched a long time ago and the Vale have been keeping secret the fact that they've got a wild dragon there for a very long time. But the way that they said it is that it just came over at the beginning of the war. It sort of flew over, so that we've got no food seems to be their only real workaround. Right. Question from Sarah A. How do you think the cat's paw dagger ended up with Littlefinger? He lied about who he lost it to, but not about the fact that it was once his. Jamie's POV confirmed this. So how did a master of coin get possession of a dagger that used to belong to royalty? This is a fascinating question. It's one that the fandom haven't really come to a conclusion on, because we don't have the information. We didn't know. So the cat's paw dagger itself has grown in the telling from being, when George R. R. Martin initially wrote about the assassin attacking Bran, he hadn't really worked up fully about Valyrian steel or how rare it was. He just like, oh, this is cool, so we'll make it. And then afterwards, he kind of realized he's not admitted it, but he's basically, in so many words, but he's basically sort of said, yeah, that is a weird weapon for him to have, that Joffrey just had no idea of the value of it and just gave it to this rando assassin. So that's, and then obviously it appeared in the first of all, the Game of Thrones initial TV show. Suddenly this turns into the dagger which is going to kill the Night King, which is obviously saving humanity. And then we get House of the Dragon, and this actually is a dagger which is passed down seemingly from king to king, and it's got the prophecy, the Prince that was promised prophecy, engraved on it. How does that pass down? So it's not clear. Because we don't hear it, because we only, the ancient stuff, the old stuff, we only get through the TV shows, and they've not shown us yet. Aemond seems to have it now. I think we can probably assume that he has it all the way through to the his death. His body is recovered, and presumably they will then take that dagger, and then it will be sort of returned to the treasury of the Targaryens, at which point it's probably just going to sort of get lost in there because the sword Blackfire becomes the real big symbol. If the person carrying it does not know that it's got this great prophecy on it, then there's no reason to think that they would treat this in any particular hallowed way. So the assumption is that this works its way as just part of Targaryen treasure all the way down through to the time of the Mad King. And it's then, when he gets killed, it's then part of the loot that Robert Baratheon claims. Now, what happens then? Well, we know that Littlefinger had it, and then he gambled for it and put it up in a bet and lost, and it went to Robert Baratheon. So logically, you might say maybe at a previous tourney they bet it and it went the other way. That's the most logical thing that kind of fits the facts. Littlefinger is hugely rich, but the idea that he would buy it and then not have it as the thing that he was wandering around with all the time, and then happily bet it. If he'd spent the amount of money he needed to in order to buy it, for him to use this as part of a random bet about the outcome of a joust, that doesn't quite stack up. So maybe he would have won it in a bet. Maybe he could have stolen it. Maybe when looking through the treasure of the Targaryens, he found it. We don't know, but it seemed, as far as we can tell, it just became a part of the Targaryen crown jewels. Carolina Clay, the Dragon Keepers, sang the same song that we saw Daemon sing at the end of last season. Two heads to a third sing. So Stefan Darklin, the one claiming the dragon, didn't sing it, and Daemon sang it to Vermithor. He wasn't trying to claim it. It seems like it's soothing and it's supposed to make the claiming process easier. What do you think is the significance and meaning of that song? I did do a video on this a while ago, if you want the sort of the deeper dive, but the headline is that there are three characters in this song. There's the dragon, there's the person singing the song, and then there's the third person who is, we assume, the rider. So the person singing the song seems to be the interlocutor, the priest, the person who is there reminding everyone of their roles, reminding everyone the price has been paid. So way back in time, we get the blood sacrifices which bonded the dragons to Valyrians. So that's harking back to their preparing the dragon for getting a new rider. And so the third part of this is the priestly function, the people who are there singing the song. So that's basically what it is. And the dragons seem to like it, but it's just like reminding everybody of what the background history here is, and then introducing this third person who is going to be the rider. So I really like that, and it fitted, incidentally, the way that they did that did fit with our best understanding of that song from when Daemon was singing it, because it was very clear he wasn't about to suddenly ride this dragon. He was singing it in this interlocutor role, saying, there's you, there's me, and there's one other person to come. And that's the way that it was sung here in season 2. The priests were there singing the song, saying, there's you, dragon, there's us here, and there's another person. Here's this other person. So it wasn't for Stefan Darklin to sing, it was for them to sing, and then for him to claim the dragon. And Nakras saying, hey, Robert, always a pleasure tuning into your streams. Thank you very much. If you could have a series or movie made based off any story from Westeros, what's your choice? I mean, at the moment, it's Bloodraven the biopic. I would happily have that. I mean, um, I'd love a Robert's Rebellion series. Um, I, I don't know necessarily. I'm slightly tongue in cheek about the Bloodraven biopic, but that period I would find fascinating. The Great Bastards, the what's going on between Bloodraven, Shira Seastar, Bitter Steel, Damon Blackfire. How do those dynamics work? I would find that absolutely fascinating. So yeah, I think that's basically what I would go for. I mean, they're not going to make that until George R. R. Martin writes it, assuming he gets around to writing it in Fire and Blood Part 2. And even then, they might not do it if they're sort of covering some of it in Dunk and Egg. But yeah, a guy can dream. Let's go to Lord Medici. I wanted to ask about the vacancy of the position of the Master of Ships on the Green Council. So after Lyman Beesbury tragically died in that accident, Tywin Lannister got appointed Master of Coin, leaving the Master of Ships position vacant. But who is attending to those duties while they find a replacement? Is Tywin holding on to them as a side project? Even if an alliance with the Triarchy is made, that's not an excuse to have your own full-time Master of Ships. Why not offer the job to the Red Wines? Okay, so what's going on there? Well, we're not told. They offer the job in book and show. They offer the job to Dalton Greyjoy, who basically says no. The Team Black send a different letter. They also realise quite how important the Iron Islanders are. They send a different letter that basically says, "Look, we're not expecting you to join up with us, but if you want to go raiding the West Coast, like you love doing, if you want to raid the Lannisters or something, that go down to Old Town, we'd be all right with that, and you wouldn't be in trouble afterwards when we win." So they won that by basically saying to the Greyjoys, "Hey, amnesty, go and attack some people." But Team Green, no, they offered this Master of Ships. Who is in charge of it? I mean, it's not clear. We're not told. I think a working assumption is yes, Tywin Lannister has kept hold of that. But there are plenty of times when a particular job is left vacant, and it gets the duties seem to be generally be picked up by the discussion in the small council and the Hand of the King. Another question from Lord Medici. Isn't the whole plan of delivering the Uber Eats boats a bit pointless? Rhaenyra knew that food, as well as all other resources, would become scarce in King's Landing as a result of her blockade. In fact, it was the blockade's whole point, to choke the Greens by cutting resource supply. And she knew that the small folk would be hit before the resource scarcity hit the Red Keep, and considered it a price worth paying. Yes, they haven't worked through this. I mean, I liked the fact that they set up the blockade. That felt very. I mean, it was in the book, but that felt very real. And I liked the fact that they showed the impact of the blockade. What they didn't do is show the discussion of what this means and therefore what strategy they should have. So, is it, as you say, is it pointless? I think on the show, the way they've set this up is no, this is actually going to be really important. They wait for everybody to be um, uh, almost starving, definitely needing fresh food, and then they provide it and they go, "This is clearly from us." So everybody says this is being sent by Rhaenyra. Then that puts them firmly in Team Black, and that helps when the inevitable attack on King's Landing happens. Then that helps because they're against the Greens and they're in favour of Team Black. Now, should that thinking have happened at the beginning? Yeah, I should have done. Somebody should have gone, right. So what are we going to do about this? Who's this? What benefit is this actually going to have? And they should have said, well, okay, this really is just going to get the small folk that the guys in the Red Keep are going to be okay. So yes, but perhaps this is just showing that the Black Council isn't. It's not. It's not that strategic either. We always talk about the Green Council as being not very strategic, just like being pretty ineffective. Actually, the Black Council also don't seem to have many strategic minds going on in there. They seem to be sort of floundering around and always looking at what the problems are. Well, we can't do this, we can't do that, rather than actually having a plan. So this is the way I'm interpreting it. Is it's just another element of showing us the lack of plan. Catherine Furseth saying, it now seems that Damon's Harrenhal arc has come to its conclusion, in the sense that it has changed him, forcing him to perhaps face his fears, regrets, but also his love for Viserys and Rhaenyra. Aemond, on the other hand, seems to go in the opposite direction at the moment, cutting himself off from emotional bonds both with his mother, but perhaps also with bonds with any bonds that he feels can weaken him. It'll be fascinating to see if he is affected in a similar way by his stay in Harrenhal. The books certainly didn't show this, but then they didn't show what happened to Daemon. I can't help but feel that this arc of being affected in this particular way by Alice or Harrenhal fits better with Daemon than Aemond. What do you think, and how will Aemond, in your mind, be affected by Alice or Harrenhal? So, what we haven't seen from this, and perhaps this is why this feels a little bit for some people, the Daemon and Harrenhal plotline, why it doesn't quite hang, is that we haven't seen the why of why he's getting this. We can see what happens, and we can see he's getting these visions, the dreams, which are taking him closer and closer to an understanding of who he is, how he's failed, where he can improve as a person. So that's all well and good, but then you say these come from Alice slash the Weirwood Network. Why do they want him to reach that position? We're not. That's never addressed in the slightest. So I think for me that's probably the bit that is kind of holding this back for many people from being something that they quite like, because it just feels like, well, here's a few of these random dreams, and yeah, I get that the result of them will be this, but what's the intentionality here? What is Alice trying to achieve? Why is she trying to make him a better person? Is it just because she's good and the Weirwood Network loves people and it wants everybody to be happy? No, I don't think that's it. There is some plan here, but they haven't even hinted that there is a plan, let alone tell us what that plan is. So that's my take there. And when it comes to Aemond, I think we have to try and go apply the same thing and say, well, whatever happens to him, why is that happening? So if Alice becomes Aemond's lover, then in the book it seems very much like he spared her because he wanted her and everybody else he killed. I don't think it's going to be quite like that on the show. I think that she will be shown to have a lot more volition in this. And as a result, we have to say, well, what does she want with him and why? Just leaving it completely up in the air doesn't feel to me to be providing us with the dramatic tension that we want. We can see what happens to Daemon, but we need to know why it's happening to Daemon. Train Surfer, thank you very much. I didn't see a question attached to that, but thank you very much for the super chat. Ard29 saying, yeah, Alice is no fairy godmother. Yeah, I mean, that's the point I think I was trying to make, but you said it more eloquently than me. Adrian Mendoza saying, I've been enjoying the dream sequences. I have too, but I know that a lot of people have found them to be sort of dragging a little bit. Kelly Summers saying the Dragon Keepers think they're like Hagrid with Buckbeak, but really it's more like they're the handlers in Jurassic Park. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Luna Cascade. A few episodes ago, Damon saw Lena and she said, "Are you tending to our daughters?" Could that have foreshadowed the replacement of Nettles? Yeah, this is one of the prevailing theories we've got out there that so in the book, for those who don't know, Damon, after King's Landing has been recaptured, he then spends a huge amount of time with Nettles, who is the person who becomes the rider, pardon me, the rider of Sheepstealer. Now, uh, people thinking that her role may have been taken over by Rhaena means that would mean Damon spending time with Rhaena, his daughter, and that would tie into this thing from Lena saying, "Are you looking after our daughters?" I completely agree with all of that logic. The only other thing is just to say, um, with this Damon story arc, with these dreams, all of these people are basically accusing him of abandoning his duties. And she's just a part of it. Viserys basically says, my wife had died, my son had died, and you abandoned us. And Rhaenyra's there saying, "Well, you always abandon me." And Laena's just part of this, is basically saying, "You've abandoned our children, haven't you?" So um, I don't see this as necessarily a setup for Rhaena taking over Nettles. They could work it like this, but it's entirely possible that this is just them going, "Well, we need another character who can accuse Damon of running away from his responsibilities. Let's not do Rhea Royce because people have forgotten who that is, but Lena, yeah, let's do Lena." Omar Mata, thank you very much for those kind words in the chat. So, friend saying, "Happy Thursday," and to you. Intrigued to get your thoughts on this episode in general. It feels a little bit like they dropped the ball. Some strange writing in this episode. That the Tullys have been ruling the Riverlands for centuries. Rhaenyra talking as though she has no army at her side, apparently forgetting that the Starks, Arryn's phrase backwards. To quote Dan and Dave, maybe she forgot. Not to mention the Dragon Lore problems George R. R. Martin ranted about, or Damon's season-long side quest. Do you think this is a blip and we'll be back on course by the end of the season? Sorry for the rant. Best wishes, warmest regards. Well, best wishes and warmest regards back to you. Um, so, just to pick up on the things that you have said there, the Tullys ruling the Riverlands for centuries sound. This was what Alice Rivers said. Yes, that kind of jarred to anyone who goes, "Well, hang on a moment. They'd only been lords paramount. They'd never been kings of the Riverlands, and they'd only been lords paramount now for 130 years. So that's not centuries." Uh, it wouldn't be the first time in George R. R. Martin's world people exaggerate time to say centuries when they don't actually mean centuries. But also technically, it doesn't say ruled the Riverlands. They have sort of kept them in order, was what was said, which, yeah, with their wisdom, which, okay, fine. It was, it felt like a little stretch, but not a massive one on that one. Rhaenyra saying that she's got no army. Yes, but so you talk about the Starks, Arryns, Freys, and Blackwoods. So the Starks still haven't got south of the neck by this point, as far as we can tell. The Arryns are not providing their troops because she hasn't kept up her side of the bargain. She didn't send them a fully grown dragon, so why on earth would they send their troops? The Blackwoods are only going to be on side. The deal they agreed with Daemon, they're only going to come on side when Daemon's sorted out the Brackens, and she doesn't know that at all because Damon's not reported back to her. So as far as she's aware, she has got no Riverlands army. And the Freys, yeah, she's sort of got them on side, but um, can you really trust the Freys? So the feeling there is at that moment in time, she didn't have an army that she could say that's my army. So I again, I think I get it. It kind of fits. At some point later, she will be able to say that she's got an army, but at this precise moment in time on the show, I don't think so. The Dragon Law things I've covered a bit already in this. So, do I think this is a blip? I and we'll be back. So I find myself in a weird position with this episode, which is that I kind of enjoyed it, and I think it held together well, just as shows canon. The Damon coming to an end of his towards an end of his character arc, where we're seeing Rhaenyra start to shift away on hers. I think that kind of echoing worked well. The Sea Smoke chasing Adam Velaryon that wasn't in the book, but I quite liked it. I think that worked quite well. There are clearly the Dragon Law questions, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt until they give me more information on them. So there there is no doubt that we can all look at this and say this is the episode where they have diverted the most away from what happens in the book. But at the same time, I don't think it was badly written as a TV show. And we always, I think, have to take a step back and acknowledge the fact that 95% of the people watching this won't know or care about how long the Tullys have been Lords Paramount of the Riverlands. And so for the majority of the audience, that worked absolutely fine. There's no issue there at all. It's the internal coherence that matters the most to me, which I hope that kind of makes sense. Let's go to Sina Jensen. You did tell me ages ago how to pronounce your name properly, and I think I've forgotten. I do apologise, but that's my best guess. Saying hi, Robert. Thank you for all your great content. Well, thank you very much. I was wondering about the dragons. Why do you think Sea Smoke chose Adam instead of him claiming it? It seems a bit easy. I watched the show with my husband, who has not read Fire and Blood, and he commented that it was kind of obvious and cliche that the dragon would choose the brother who was resenting that Corlys is ignoring him. And what about the whole Rhaena Nettles mixing? Well, I've covered the Rhaena Nettles thing, if that's okay, already. Is it easy or cliche? I guess people could argue that it was just actually strong writing. If it felt inevitable, then that perhaps you could argue is reasonable writing. So I quite liked this idea. It felt like this added to the dragons are independent. The idea that there was like, no, I'm not having that person you're trying to push on me, but I've seen someone I kind of like. So yeah, fine. You sing the song. I want another rider. I'll go and get that one. So that kind of it's a shift. It's new information about dragons, but I kind of liked it. They have I think the thing with it seems a bit cliche is that in the book we didn't know about these guys at all until they're riding dragons. So on the show, they've made a decision that they are going to show us these dragon riders, with the possible exception of Nettles. I'll refer you to the discussion we had slightly earlier. They decided they wanted to show us these dragon riders so that we understood their stories or a bit of their stories before they got those dragons. which is why we've got bits about Hugh Hammer, bits about Alf White, bits about Adam Valarion. He's Adam of Hull at the moment. And what are you going to show there? Well, if they're setting this up, a lot of this is a kind of a roundabout way of saying this, but the kind of impression I get is that they're setting this up that rather than having this massive policy shift which is what happens in the book, which seems very dramatic, that they go from nobody but Targaryens, or maybe the Valarians, if they've married into the family, can be riding a dragon, which was their policy for hundreds of years. And it was basically also the policy of the Valyrian Freehold beforehand. These are the families that are allowed to ride dragons, and no one else is allowed to ride dragons. They changed completely in the book. It was just this complete shift to, okay, anyone who thinks they might be part Targaryen can come and try. That seems huge shift. And so I actually kind of understood this. Well, maybe we will go with people that we think we might trust. The idea of going to Steffon Darklin, who we've established as being a trustworthy figure, the person that Rhaenyra took with her when she went to King's Landing. He seems to be good and loyal, and they find that there's a possibility that he could ride a dragon. They'll try with him first. That makes absolute sense, rather than, to me, as a first step, and then rather than let's just throw it open. They then have gone from that to we don't want him to be bonding with Seasmoke. Seasmoke now goes off and gets somebody else. What we've seen from the trailer seems to be, we saw already Rhaenyra has flown off. She's going to confront him and say, "You're flying one of my dragons," and he will be. Yeah, it's not really down to me. This is just what happened. Who are you? Well, okay, in all honesty, I'm actually the sea snake's bastard son. That then puts the idea in their mind that maybe or maybe we can trust these guys, because this guy is Corlys's son. So maybe there are like some out there who are got a better chance than we had with Steffon Darklin, who we've already established that was the closest in the kind of the part of the lordly culture, that was the closest link that they could get. They can definitely get a closer one from there. And it turns out that Adam Valarion is very happy to say, yeah, okay, I'll be on your side. So that kind of logic sort of works better for me. I think this feels like a good change on the TV show from the book, from just what should we do now? Okay, let's let anybody try to ride a dragon, whoever they are, doesn't matter. Let's not worry about it. To a more staged approach that works well for me. So I think the bit that you talk about, the fact that it might have been kind of obvious and cliche that the dragon would choose him, that's a kind of a side effect of the actually trying to make the whole process feel more organic. Gerard Tolkien, salutations, Robert. Salutations to you too, sir. Every time we see Larys, he seems to get more and more mysterious. And the more we see of him, the more that theory of him being able to walk seems to be correct. We see his half-sister, Alice, is still a possible warg with her barn owl. That's in inverted commas. That's not confirmed. And I'm starting to seriously suspect that he might be warging with the rats. What are your thoughts on his warg abilities? So, I mean, I'm still kind of mixed on this. This season has definitely made it more likely because he's got the link across to Harrenhal, and because they went so heavily on the Harrenhal is Weirwood network. To the extent that if you haven't noticed with the architecture, as they're wandering around the halls of Harrenhal, the roots of the Weirwood tree are breaking through. You can see them breaking through the walls. You can see them running along the floor. They're having to step over them within the castle itself. And that is a deliberate attempt to show that the Weirwood network is trying to reclaim their land from the castle. So they are making Harrenhal this really Weirwood network friendly place. And that means that we have to consider people who come from there. What are they? What's their relationship? Because they have to have some relationship with the Weirwood network, whether it's a positive or negative one. They have to have some kind of relationship there. And Larys, you'd assume from what we've seen, would be if he thinks that he can learn more information, then yeah, why not? So I think it's gone up in likelihood this season. He's already made. I mean, he's talked about it now a couple of times. The link between him and Harrenhal has been made several times, many episodes this season. So they want us to be seeing the link across to him, which again just underlines the basic fact that he is from there and so knows what Damon is going through to some degree. Question from James Horner. Hello, Robert. Hi. Given that Rhaenyra had two legitimate children with Daemon, do you think a war was always going to happen, even if the Greens didn't try and take the throne? Given the kind of society that the Seven Kingdoms is, surely some ambitious lord a few generations down the line would try and get one of Aegon the Younger's sons or grandsons to try and claim the throne, saying something along the lines of, you should be king and not your cousin because your uncle was a bastard, or maybe one of Viserys' sons. So yes, my answer to this is always that the Targaryens, almost every generation, have a succession crisis. So if it wasn't this particular thing, it would have been something else. And there's no reason to doubt that some Targaryens would have disputed the claim anyway. If you go back to before, well, if you go back right to the start, you have this Aegon passed it on to Aenys without too much of a problem, but then after him, Maegor comes and claims it by force, and then after him, Jaehaerys and his supporters claim the throne after he dies, but ahead of any other potential people. Aeria Targaryen, for example, had a better claim. But they just ignored that and just put him in there by force. When at the end of Jaehaerys' reign, we have the Great Council, and we got told Corlys and Daemon both started amassing armies in case the result went against them, and that it was only not a war afterwards because the result was so overwhelming. So each generation has some kind of succession crisis. So yeah, undoubtedly there would have been another one. Mimi K-Cat saying, show only person, so I'm not sure if I should ask due to potential spoilers, but why hasn't Aemond gone ahead and married his betrothed? I know not much time has passed, but wouldn't he have an interest in going ahead and working on trying for heirs? So yeah, he gets betrothed to one of the Baratheon daughters. Why doesn't he get married? Because he's too busy doing things, I think, is the short answer. There's no spoilers here. It's not really mentioned again. And he's got the alliance, so the alliance should be there, but there was no implication that they were going to immediately marry. Should he be wanting to get heirs for himself? Yes, but I think even he realizes that the first priority is actually not getting married and getting heirs, but getting rid of the people who want to take the throne away from him/his brother. So, yeah, I don't think there's any great layers to that. I think it is just simply priorities. Then we've got Carolina Clay, do you think that the new Dunk and Egg show will make it clear that Dunk wasn't actually knighted? On that note, do you think he was actually knighted? Um, I think we're supposed to infer he wasn't knighted by Sir Arlen, but he embodies all the ideals of a true knight, making him a truer knight than many others in the story. Do you think he will eventually tell Egg and Maekar? Um, so yeah, I mean, this is, I suppose, spoilers for the TV show, but in the book, I think this is reasonably clear. He doesn't. Dunk is not knighted. He is not Sir Dunk in reality, and we get that made very clear in the Hedge Knight. The very first scene we have, he's there. He's burying his old um, master, and he's thinking, "What do I do now? Um, I'm his squire. What do I do? Well, I could go and I guess I could go and join a city watch somewhere." And then we read he literally just like he has an idea and he goes, "Oh, hang on a moment." And then the next reread, he's saying that he's a knight, but he's like embarrassed, he's bright red. Um, and when he's asked to do things that a knight can do, like knight somebody else, then he's like, no, I can't do that. So we get all of these, the hints are there all the way through that he's no true knight. He even thinks about when when Egg kind of admits that, he's actually not who he said he was, because Egg pretends just to be some sort of stable hand for a while, and then he reveals who he actually is, and Dunk goes, "Yeah, I know what it's like to have a big secret like that." So it's pushed down our throats pretty strongly, I think, in the books that he is not. But as you say, the important point here is that he is actually a true knight. He embodies everything that a knight should be, really. He's truthful, he's honest, he cares for those who and protects those who can't look after themselves. The women, children, old people, he's always going and without even thinking about himself, he goes in and tries to do the right thing. And so this is an irony that George R. R. Martin loves, that the truest knights are actually technically not knights. Brienne is technically not a knight, but she is a good and true knight, better than the other knights that she comes across. Martin S., what other fantasy worlds have a similar political structure to George R. R. Martin's world? I would say Ted Williams' world, Austen Ard, and Robin Hobb's worlds. Are there any others? Yeah, well, Robin Hobb's world is definitely very similar to George R. R. Martin's world. That's the six duchies rather than the seven kingdoms. And you have a family who are the ruling family who have this kind of these magical powers um, that they use to kind of like protect the six duchies. Um, and there are lots of other similarities going along there. In terms of just broad political structure, a lot of this is based on um, sort of British and Western European feudal models. So it's not that George R. R. Martin came up with a completely new idea of how to create a fantasy world, and a lot of kind of generic. I mean, so just to pick one random other example, Raymond E. Feist with his Midkemia world is set on this same kind of idea as you have the king, and then underneath and this kind of royal family, and underneath them you get dukes and barons, and the feudal society works its way. The money works its way up, and then sort of power resides at the top unless it is passed down to somebody. So it's a standard-ish fantasy structure, I would say. Which doesn't mean it's not great. It's just it's that I don't. That's not the thing about his world which is unique and interesting. Train Surfer saying, "Can you try and answer my super chat? I've attempted to send it twice. Yeah, I saw you sent the super chat. I didn't see a question attached to it. Let me have a quick flick back, see whether I can um, see whether I can see it. Here we go. So, any thoughts about the kiss? Um, yeah. I mean, not many. It's the short answer. For those, this is the Rhaenyra and Mysaria kiss. Um, I would say it felt kind of natural. It kind of seemed to work. Um, Now, apparently, this was the the actor playing Rhaenyra, Emma Darcy's idea, um, that they kiss, and it was sort of kind of made up on the spot. So it was just like going with the flow of what it feels like. But this was something also apparently that both of those two actors were told at the very beginning this was where their character arcs were going, which interestingly is something that's been it's been ever since Fire and Blood came out. There have been people who speculated that maybe this was what happened because there were rumors about Rhaenyra already perhaps being bisexual. There was the her and Lena, is they missed this out completely on the show. Her and Lena, Damon's wife Lena, we got told with kind of like the typical Maester language of they were close, more than close, which is their kind of like, is there something more there? And we get told that Rhaenyra was devastated when, or I can't remember the exact word, but that was basically it when Lena died. So the implication was that there was something going on there. And then some people, ever since Fire and Blood came out, some people have speculated that maybe there was something that was going on between Rhaenyra and Mysaria, which, for the same reasons that people are now speculating, oh, is this maybe why Mysaria turns Rhaenyra against Daemon? Because that seems like a bit of an odd move unless she's got some kind of personal issue going on there. So, yeah, it felt like they were going to go down that route anyway, and it may well have just happened a little bit earlier than they were planning on doing it. But I think it kind of fits with the particularly Rhaenyra's story arc. Mysaria's a little bit more mysterious, but I thought it was good. And uh, so Elizabeth Goebel saying, thank you for acknowledging that the books did hint at Rhaenyra being open to swinging both ways. Some people are dead against that being in the book. It's not the problem we always have with Fire and Blood is that this is written by the Maesters, who they have an agenda and they clearly don't acknowledge a lot of things that they just don't like or approve of. You get the Rhaena and uh, Alyssa Farman thing, which is, to anybody reading it, is so blatantly obvious what was going on there. But the Maesters don't really. I can't remember the exact language that they use, but a close companion or something along those lines. It's very clear that Jane Arryn was in a relationship with a woman. I've forgotten her name now. The woman for a long time, and the Maesters just kind of like waffle their way around that. So this is what they do. So we have to uh, accept and understand that we don't have the full knowledge and information of what was really going on. We're having to read this through, and this is good writing. I think we're having to read this through the mindset of the Maesters. So yeah, it's definitely there in the book. I don't think there's any way of getting around it. I mean, it's not written exactly in plain, but it is more than open to interpretation. Is the way I would say it. Andrew Kay saying, my only concern with the Duncan Egg show is that they're going to surpass the source material. 3 short novellas will be covered quite quickly. Yes. they. I mean, you're obviously right. George R. R. Martin has acknowledged that this is an issue. Uh, what we're looking at, though, is they're filming now. Hello, hello, hi. Can you see me again? Um, I got a bit. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. My computer just went completely just turned off on its own. Okay, let me. I was talking about Duncan Egg. I can't remember exactly what it is, but in terms of when the different episodes are happening, so we it's filming now, and with a view to its happening, season one happening in next year, 2025, and then I assume that they won't be able to go faster than one season per year. So they're looking at 25, 26, and 27. They could go alternate years with House of the Dragon, but I think given the fact that it's very dependent on the age of the characters staying roughly the same, then I think they probably won't. So what we're looking at is 2027, and George R. R. Martin, I think he must be hoping that he can finish off uh, uh, the Winds of Winter by then, and then move on. So I don't know. It's an odd one, but he is aware of the issue, and he thinks that he can keep ahead of it. That's what he thought. Obviously, when he was doing, pardon me, when his Game of Thrones was on. So it's up to you, I guess, the extent to which you um, believe him or not. Right now, unfortunately, with all of that, I probably lost. Oh no, here we go. I managed to. My computer's being clever enough to bring me back my document. I put all of the questions uh, I have from Patreon over into a separate document, but I have managed to get that back. Okay, let's go to. Um, Commander Ray, when John learns of his, so we're moving out more broadly than just the House of the Dragon now. This is sort of more broad. A Song of Ice and Fire questions. When John learns of his true identity, it will dramatically shift his perspective and perhaps even his goals. I wanted to ask, when do you think he'll get that info, and which aspect affects him the most in the story ahead? The father who lied and is his uncle, the birth father that gives him dragon blood, an heir to the throne, a mother he always wanted to know and marks him as a true Stark, or the fact Robert's rebellion was basically fought for him and his mother, which, if he learns of it, was because of the prince that was promised. So, um, my working take is that he will be told of his true identity, but in terms of his personality, he is going to remain Ned Stark's son. So I don't think he will want to become king. I don't want it. I don't. I think that that is pretty true from what happened in the show. I think that's going to be true in the book. I don't think he's going to want to become king. I think that he will be burned by what happens. Quite literally, perhaps. And at the end of it, like on the show, he will want to leave the Seven Kingdoms, like Frodo at the end of the Lord of the Rings. So yes, he's going to get. I think he will be told. Maybe maybe we will get Howland Reed. This is my big hope, is maybe Howland Reed will make an appearance. George R. Martin basically said he's not made an appearance yet because he knows too much. So when he does, perhaps he will tell everyone. But by that point, the focus of people like that talking to him about it, as you say, is not just about who's going to be sitting on the Iron Throne. It's about this is about being the prince that was promised. And I have a feeling that John probably won't get caught up in all of this kind of prophecy stuff. He will just do what he does, and people will think that he is doing the prince that was promised thing. 444. On one hand, I'm very excited for the Iron Throne stage play. On the other hand, I must admit I have two main concerns: affordability and accessibility. Let me explain. The books are widely accessible as translated to many languages, and at least in comparison to other forms of entertainment, are not expensive. And there's obviously libraries and borrowing from a friend. Similarly, for streaming service TV series, affordability is a big factor. First, the potential spectator needs to travel to the city where the theatre is located, if I remember correctly, mentioned as the first wave were London, New York, and Melbourne. Then try and buy rather expensive tickets. Accessibility is a problem too. How many seats in each theatre? How many people can see it in a night? No chance for dubbing or subtitles. So the potential spectator must be fluent in the language used in the particular theatre. Unless there will be some TV or film adaptation of the play, or at least the text of the play will be published as a separate book, most fans won't be able to know all these exciting details about the tourney at Harrenhal. So I understand this. I am excited for the stage play, and I will admit that I am in a privileged position in that they. The plan is for it to start in London, and that's easy for me to get to see stage plays. So I will admit that I'm in a good position as far as here. But everything you say is absolutely valid. The way, from what we've seen and understood, is that the way that they seem to be planning on doing this is it starts off in London. It'll be in a theatre. It does a run in London, and then after that, it will go over to. It might stay in London, but then it will go over to New York and maybe Melbourne, and then it could go on the road around to various places. Now, that obviously, in and of itself, limits the amount of people who can see this to how many people in a theatre, 1,000 or whatever in a theatre. Probably only one, maybe two shows per day. They are going to be expensive. It is quite hard to get to. So yes, all of the things that you say, and also the language issues as well. If it's just in English and not translated, all of these things are absolutely 100% true. I suspect what's going to happen is something similar to what happened when the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child stage play happened. Which was that it started in London. It's still in London, actually, incidentally. It's gone over to New York, and I think it has gone to various other places. But they also released a book, which basically is, and I think it was just the script as much as anything else. Don't have it. But so they released it so that people who couldn't get to the stage play could still read this. Now, that they could easily translate into other languages. So I would imagine that if they've got this, they will not wish to miss out on a potentially very lucrative um, extra thing that they could do. If they can produce something that has got the big George R. R. Martin tag on the top, and they can market it as something akin to a new book, a new story from George R. R. Martin, even if he's not the lead writer on it, then I think that they will definitely do that. So that would be um, where I go. I think yes, all of your accessibility points are entirely valid, but I think that they will try to overcome that because I think it's in their best interests to try to overcome it. So I'm hoping. By the way, I hope that I didn't miss any super chats. I just saw Callie Summers saying they were roommates. Is that that sounds like what they the euphemism that they used in the Wheel of Time. Okay, and I think there is Elizabeth Goebel for super chat for actually pronouncing my last name correctly earlier and not saying gobble. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Good. I like getting people's names right. I don't always, but I do like that. And Carl Carstark saying most Broadway plays come out with a filmed version of the stage show in some form. It just takes a little while until the theatre show has had its time. Yeah, I think that's the other thing. Is say for example Hamilton. I've seen Hamilton a stage show on TV. I can't remember it was with one streaming service or another. So I imagine that they will have a period when it's just in the theatre, and then they will just try and get it out there. Um, pardon me. Question. We've got some Lord of the Rings questions now. Ranabin Mitra says Rings of Power question. I know you've deduced that the stranger is Gandalf, but I personally think there's a good chance that Nerd of the Rings is possibly correct, that this being one of the Blue Wizards. Fellowship of the Fans claimed that Kieran Hines, the person who played Mance Rayder, has been cast as a wizard in the East who is due to meet the stranger. Could we be seeing Alatar meet Palando or Alorin meeting Kuranir? Cliff from the OneRing.net claims that the stranger will be told his name this season. Well, I mean, I am in no way going to be contradicting any of those fine gentlemen that you're quoting there. My instinct is that season one with the stranger, they deliberately threw out a lot of different clues to suggest different things. The last episode they were going heavy on this is Gandalf, but I think the Blue Wizard thing kind of makes sense, to be honest. The more I think about it after the season, I've not rewatched it, but being one of the two Blue Wizards definitely makes sense. And Matt knows his stuff. So Andrew Biederman saying, what weapons in Middle-earth were actually magical? We know of Sting, Orcrist, and Glamdring with their Orc detection. Then the Blades of Westerness from the Barrow have power against Wraiths, and Dural gets a magic scabbard. Is that the extent of it? And why aren't there more or with greater levels of power? Well, again, Tolkien had a famously soft magic system. So to say something is magical is, in many ways, it's not like saying I've now got a +3 longsword or something like that. That's not how it worked. There are plenty. If you dig back into the Silmarillion, you'll find plenty of. I mean, there's a talking sword and everything back there, but they're not generally magical per se. You get as in formally magical. What you get is a lot of the stuff that say the elves do, which just feels different and better. So they give Legolas a bow, the range of which is far beyond anything that he's done. Is that just good technology? Is that magic? probably a little bit of both. You get a lot of dwarven hammers have got runes on them. These can make them stronger and things like that. That is kind of magic, but again, it's kind of low key magic. The the ring wraiths have got magical weapons. You'll remember the dagger that they had, um, which the Morgul blade, which the end broke off and then tried to burrow its way into Frodo. And if it had succeeded, then he would have become a wraith himself. So there's lots of these different weapons. Also, Grond. I did a video about Grond. Do you remember the big battering ram they had when they were attacking? The bad guys were attacking Minas Tirith. That was definitely magical. We get told that Sauron had, I can't remember the exact words, placed enchantments upon it. So the more you dig, the more you find lots of things that feel magical. It's just that Tolkien rarely sets out the exact things that they do. And Martin S, you're asking a question about Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which I'm afraid I'm going to pass on. I have read it. You're right. I have indeed read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but that was a long time ago. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that one for you, I'm afraid. That's all my questions for my patrons, though. I will have a quick flick through the chat. And Andrew Kay saying Hamilton was quite a few years later from the original stage release to get on streaming platform. Yep. But I think that's the idea. I completely get it. I think it was Carl Karsnock who said that they did that, and I think that probably makes sense for them to be heading down that route as well. And Aegon Dragonborn asking, would Vermithor and Silverwing fight each other had they been in different war factions, or would they disobey their riders? Their bond is special. We wouldn't have known or seen, but the relations between dragons is the dragon rider can sort of overcome that in most instances. So, for example, when we have Daemon on Caraxes fighting Aemond on Vhagar, Caraxes and Vhagar knew each other really well. Vhagar had been Daemon's wife's dragon, and they'd flown together around all over the place. So Vhagar, and maybe they'll show something on the show that is like, actually, Vhagar doesn't want to attack them. I don't know, but probably they won't make a reference to that at all, and that seems to be the general default case. Vermithor and Silverwing, they did seem to have an extra special bond because they were ridden by the same people for such a long period of time. But I don't think there's nothing that seems to suggest that they wouldn't have attacked each other. Andrew Kay saying, especially with all of Warner's money and power, they will probably push the play on Max much sooner than it took Hamilton. Yes. I mean, I have to admit, I don't know the rights issue with the stage play, in as much as George R. Martin clearly has given HBO the right to develop TV shows based on his work. The stage play appears to be different and outside of that. I'm not 100% sure on that, but then they would have to then make a decision, if that's the case, independent from that, if they wish to be doing it streaming. Now, if I don't know, there are plenty of options. If they want to, they could do what in this country, in Britain, do the National Theatre, which is fantastic theatre. They quite often stream a play which is happening in the theatre, not just on TV, but in cinemas around the country. So if there's like a big, I can remember there was Frankenstein. They did Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, I think it was, and that they streamed that in cinemas across the country as well as on TV, and that's the kind of thing that they could do if they wish to expand it. My instinct is they will start with just having it and feel like an exclusive ticket, and they will charge huge amounts of money for it. But then after that, they will expand it out much more broadly. Okay, I think with that, I will start bringing this one to a close. So, apologies, by the way, for the slight technical glitch partway through this. As I said, my computer just turned off. I do not know what happened there. But yeah, thankfully we got back up nice and quick. In terms of stuff coming up, we've obviously got episode 7 happening this week. So my breakdown on that will be coming up. What other videos I've got? Well, go and check out the channel. If you would like to see more live streams, then there's going to be, if you're watching on YouTube later, somewhere around here is going to be a link to more live streams. Somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Moderators, thank you. You did a fantastic job, particularly when I disappeared. Also, patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate you. That is all for this week. I will see you on Sunday for the pre-show live stream. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.